Rachel awakens inside the world of Hero and Eternity, the game she once adored after a crushing fever makes her collapse, strike her head, and recover unsettling memories, while a dark-haired boy sobs at her bedside, somehow feeling painfully familiar to her, until the realization overwhelms her and her vision drops into complete darkness once more. In her previous life, she was a Japanese schoolgirl obsessed with this classic fantasy romance, whose story begins in Lent Village, the hero's quiet hometown and first stage, and the worried boy beside her is Alfred, asking whether she feels all right, though his gentle concern only leaves her staring in stunned, breathless disbelief and silence, which makes Alfred blush as he nervously wonders why she keeps watching him. So she carefully asks him a question she desperately needs answered without explaining her fear, whether another boy in the village shares his name, age, and black hair. But he confirms only he and his mother have black hair, crushing her remaining doubt because Alfred is unmistakably the game's protagonist, the destined hero himself standing beside her. Yet the shaken girl still asks whether he has any other childhood friend bearing her name, and when Alfred says nobody else exists, she clutches her head as panic breaks loose, alarming him so badly that he jolts forward and asks whether she is truly okay, before racing away to summon her aunt, convinced the fever has returned again, leaving her alone with the truth that she inhabits the hero's childhood friend, a girl whose tragic romantic ending she remembers far too well from the game, and she refuses to accept being cast as the losing heroine in her own life. Born Rachel Urquhart, she is an ordinary family's eldest daughter and Alfred's lifelong childhood friend. But the original story turns cruel when monsters invade their village and Alfred collapses protecting her, before becoming the hero, marrying the saint, and receiving Rachel's lonely blessing from the sidelines. That makes her reincarnation painfully clear. She has inherited the game's designated losing heroine role, and surrendering Alfred's romance is acceptable, but surrendering her eyesight absolutely is not. Because this second life still holds countless experiences and choices she refuses to lose, making the beauty she once considered lucky feel bitterly tied to a terrible fate. Looking into the mirror, she studies the face that belongs to this doomed character, from its flowing golden hair to eyes that shine like polished jewels with impossible clarity, plus remarkably smooth skin untouched by sunburn despite all her work in the fields. And even Rachel must admit the losing heroine received an almost unfairly beautiful design, though none of those lovely details matter beside the danger waiting in her future, so she resolves to escape the crisis before the game's plot can claim her sight, knowing that passive acceptance will carry her directly toward the sorrowful ending she remembers. And although Alfred currently sees her only as a childhood friend, blindness would reshape her entire life, which forces her to reconstruct the disaster beginning with monsters invading Lent Village, because one forgotten detail decides whether her desperate plan has any chance of succeeding. During the attack, she and Alfred flee together until another monster corners them, and when Rachel shields him, its poisonous spray strikes her face and destroys her vision, leaving her present self suspended at the moment that sacrifice should have occurred. Replaying the timeline, Rachel recalls the attack occurs when Alfred reaches 18, while both children are only 10 now, giving her one precious advantage: 8 full years to change the future before the monster invasion can ever begin. With her resolve finally settled, she rushes from bed toward the single plan she trusts, ignoring her mother's offer to excuse her from farm chores while she recovers, and startling the whole family by appearing energetic enough to demand something much bigger. She turns directly to her father, calling for his full attention before anyone can interrupt, while he innocently assumes his feverish daughter merely wants a special piece of candy, even joking that her appetite resembles her mother's and provoking an immediate protest across the table, until Rachel announces her real request. She wants him to teach her swordsmanship. Though officially a farmer, her father commands Lent Village's defense and remains its finest swordsman, yet the original timeline rewards that courage by making him the invasion's first victim, so remembering his death strengthens her determination to train hard enough to save him too. 8 years may not guarantee victory, but daily effort gives her family at least a fighting chance, and her smiling father accepts the challenge, ready to begin without treating her like glass. Rachel answers eagerly, only to discover Alfred volunteering beside her with equal excitement, claiming he heard about today's lesson and blushing hard enough to leave her suspicious, especially when he presents her father with a carefully chosen food offering, addresses the older man with innocent sweetness, and prepares his very obvious request, asking to join their training while the delighted swordsman accepts the shameless little bribe. Her father agrees, though Rachel realizes Alfred won him over using her strawberry sandwich, then begins with basic practice swings, carefully correcting the children's grip and posture, while Alfred's natural sword form earns immediate praise for its remarkable promise, leaving the thrilled boy nearly glowing when he asks whether the compliment is genuine. Her father invites Rachel to try next, gently encouraging her with an affectionate pat. But her frozen silence makes him pause and ask what has suddenly gone wrong, until one strained sound answers him more honestly than any confident explanation could. She cannot lift the practice sword, much less complete a single proper swing. With sword drills impossible, her father starts her on basic strength training instead, and Rachel quietly accepts, determined to build the body this plan requires. 3 exhausting months later, her father finally admits their approach simply is not working, declaring martial arts beyond her while she collapses from another hopeless session, because daily exercise has produced no muscle and still cannot let her hold a sword. Alfred offers immediate comfort, promising the breathless girl that everything will be okay since he plans to grow strong enough for both of them, wearing the hero's sincere smile. But Rachel remembers that the original Alfred froze before the monster and needed her protection, so she cries out in frustration, terrified of facing that attack without a blade, until Alfred suggests other talents, farming, cooking, sewing, or perhaps even magic, and that final possibility catches her attention, turning despair into a startled question, before Rachel seizes the idea with sudden joy and declares that magic is her answer. The solution feels obvious because this fantasy world contains magic alongside its swords, so Rachel asks her father for lessons, dismissing his concern that she is too young and clings to him until he surrenders and promises to teach her immediately. Alfred eagerly joins again, unwilling to miss another chance to learn beside her, while her father chooses basic fire magic as the simplest place to begin, explaining that success only requires concentration and a vivid image of flame. Before igniting a twig himself and making the effortless demonstration look wonderfully promising, he hands both children their own branches, inviting them to repeat his little trick, and Rachel watches closely as Alfred focuses beside her with quiet determination, producing a flame on his first attempt as naturally as he handled the sword. Her father praises Alfred's magical talent too, leaving Rachel envious but stubbornly hopeful. So she concentrates on the clearest image of fire her anxious mind can summon, gathering every ounce of focus while the silent twig stubbornly refuses to respond, until repeated attempts leave the branch as cold and ordinary as before. Her father admits this is strange because nearly anyone should manage such basic fire, then suggests Rachel may simply lack that affinity and could excel with another element, encouraging her to test every remaining kind before surrendering this new plan. But each experiment fails, leaving the exhausted girl collapse beneath one miserable question. Why? Even her father cannot understand why she seems entirely unable to use magic. While Alfred offers farming, cooking, and sewing as comfort, skills Rachel knows cannot stop monsters. Left with neither sword nor common magic, Rachel fears the losing heroine's future is unavoidable, until her father abruptly rises and decides there is still one proper test available. He announces a trip to the temple, startling Rachel with this sudden change of direction, and when she asks why, her confusion only deepens his determination to investigate, because the temple can examine her aptitude and identify whatever magical affinity she possesses. Refusing to accept failure before that verdict, Rachel immediately embraces this final possibility, then thanks her father as he cheerfully prepares to take both children there. The imposing temple awaits beyond Lent Village, transforming her hopeful experiment into something solemn, while an elderly priest welcomes the family and guides them toward the examination chamber, where towering columns frame a quiet path to the sacred testing apparatus. Alfred admits the place feels exciting, but Rachel can only answer through mounting nerves, knowing the result may decide whether she can change the future or remain helpless. At the chamber's center rests a smooth crystal orb prepared for the ritual, and the priest instructs her to place both hands carefully against its surface. The instant Rachel obeys, brilliant light floods the crystal and dances around her, shocking her father while the priest stares at a result neither man expected. He assures them nothing is wrong. This radiance marks an extraordinarily rare light affinity, unlike ordinary people who can access fire, water, wind, and earth in varying degrees. This singular affinity is formally known as white magic, an exceptional category all its own, and according to the priest, only a saintess is believed capable of wielding it. White magic specializes in healing and support rather than combat, yet every hero's party needs it, which sounds disturbingly close to the game's claim that only one saintess exists, giving Rachel an immediate, deeply unpleasant suspicion about where this discovery may lead. The priest hesitates before the family, looking increasingly troubled by the conclusion he must deliver, then begins explaining exactly what a young woman with the white affinity represents, and solemnly declares that Rachel herself must be the saintess. She rejects the title instantly, her refusal echoing through the sacred chamber, because official recognition would force her into the hero's party for a dangerous journey against the Demon King. When all Rachel wants is to break her losing heroine fate and live peacefully in Lent Village, the priest insists her power unmistakably belongs to a saintess, regardless of what she wants, but Rachel counters that the true noble saintess should appear 3 years from now. Her impossible knowledge leaves Alfred, her father, and the priest wondering whether she knows the future, until she fiercely repeats that she is merely a village girl, frightening them into agreement. Unfortunately, the priest is legally required to report every white magic user to the kingdom, so Rachel makes him confirm once more that his report will not simply crown her. She insists the genuine saintess will emerge from nobility in 3 years and settle everything, demanding that he include that prediction as well, with no convenient omissions. Satisfied, Rachel convinces herself she has escaped the saintess route before it can begin, then takes her father's hand and leaves, while he offers the bewildered priest a hasty apology, unaware that the temple report may already have carried her far beyond village life. Outside, an excited Alfred calls Rachel's discovery amazing while she can barely manage the walk home, then celebrates her as the saintess until she firmly warns him that everything changes if he is wrong. Accepting that title could rewrite the story, when Rachel only wants to prevent her blindness and her father's death, without stealing the future Saintess's place beside Alfred or pretending to love him romantically. Becoming the Saintess would create problems far beyond romance, destroying the ordinary village life she values, but Alfred suddenly catches both her hands and says her name with wholehearted resolve, promising that if Rachel truly becomes the Saintess, he will become the hero beside her. She gently thanks him, privately amused because the game already chose him for that role. Back home, Rachel studies every white magic technique the original Saintess used throughout the game, only to discover the list contains no offensive spell she can wield against monsters. White magic focuses entirely on healing and support, while her frail arms make physical attacks equally hopeless, leaving Rachel trapped once again with another promising path ending in frustration. She searches deeper and considers body enhancement as a possible way around her weakness, but strengthening her body still cannot create the muscle needed to damage an enemy, merely letting her lift hay faster without solving the monster threat that actually matters. Exhausted by another dead end, Rachel falls across her bed and wonders what remains, until a half-forgotten note among her papers catches her attention from the floor, identifying a white magic technique designed specifically to repel monsters, the same power that prevented dungeon encounters by making hostile creatures avoid the Saintess, which suggests direct contact might turn that protective effect into an actual attack. Encouraged by the theory, Rachel decides her real training will begin the very next morning. She brings Alfred into the forest, though he nervously questions why she needed him there, and reminds him that he recently begged the adults for practical combat experience, leaving the young swordsman to admit that is true while still doubting her plan. Since they have already come this far, Rachel refuses to entertain any more complaints, but Alfred suddenly catches a sound nearby and turns toward the hidden movement. She establishes one emergency signal, a fire spell fired skyward if either child faces real danger, after which they will wait inside her protective barrier until the village defenders arrive. Alfred accepts those precautions, trusting Rachel enough to continue despite his concern, and together they advance through the grass toward whatever has approached. Rachel spots their first opponent and moves ahead while Alfred watches from behind. Finding a slime, the classic beginner monster and perfect target for this dangerous experiment, Alfred promises to intervene if her magic fails, keeping his practice sword ready, while Rachel reassures herself that the idea should work if her reasoning is correct. She presses both hands against the slime and concentrates the full force of monster repulsion, unleashing the white magic through direct contact with one determined cry, then retreats beside Alfred and waits breathlessly to see whether anything changed. The slime begins dissolving before them, proving her improvised attack genuinely works, and Rachel throws herself around Alfred in celebration, squeezing him until he protests, before apologizing with a radiant smile because relief briefly overwhelmed her restraint. Still blushing from the embrace, Alfred asks whether using that much magic hurt her. But Rachel only beams, proud that she proved white magic can attack monsters too. Her success leaves Alfred genuinely impressed, and he calls her achievement amazing without hesitation, which she accepts with shameless satisfaction, delighted that her desperate idea actually worked, until her father's voice interrupts the celebration and drains the color from her face. He fixes both children with a dangerous smile, pausing just long enough to frighten them, before roaring that they are complete idiots for risking their lives alone. Asked whether she understands her mistake, Rachel kneels beside Alfred in immediate repentance, and both children bow obediently, offering the meekest agreement they can manage. Her father stresses that Alfred was placed in danger as well, making Rachel's choice even worse, so she accepts the accusation while Alfred watches her take responsibility beside him. He tries defending his mentor, explaining that he understood the plan and agreed to participate, only for her father to silence him before that loyalty can soften the lecture. Rachel searches frantically for an explanation that will not expose her impossible memories, fearing that claims about reincarnation and future knowledge would make everyone question her sanity. She chooses the safest truth instead, admitting she wanted to test white magic against a monster, after practicing its repelling effect ever since learning that white magic belonged to her. Her father objects that using sacred support magic offensively should be impossible, but Rachel insists she truly can do it, refusing to let disbelief erase the evidence. She explains that one adjusted application harms monsters, leaving him to ask whether she is certain. Alfred supports her immediately, telling his mentor that he personally witnessed Rachel defeat the slime. Yet she cannot hide her irritation when her father still hesitates to believe them. His doubt is understandable because her claim contradicts everything people teach about white magic, but he finally relents and decides the evidence deserves an honest examination. Her father asks Rachel to demonstrate the technique, promising to watch the monster fall himself, so the three return beneath the forest canopy in search of another target. Their footsteps carry them deeper through the quiet undergrowth before anything hostile appears, until her father warns them not to wander farther because monsters should emerge nearby. Rachel grumbles that they came specifically to find one, impatient to silence his skepticism, though she privately admits he cannot trust such an outrageous claim without seeing it. They continue together, with Alfred and her father flanking Rachel through the grass. until a familiar shape catches her eye and gives the demonstration its opening. Another slime waits ahead, providing a wonderfully convenient repeat of her first experiment, and Rachel immediately strikes it with concentrated monster-repelling white magic, sending a bright burst through the creature while both witnesses observe from safety. The shaken slime recoils under the unfamiliar force, visibly affected by her attack. And Rachel firmly explains that she intensified repulsion, not secretly used ordinary elemental magic. Her father apologizes, admitting lifelong teaching made him assume white magic could never attack, and sincerely regrets letting that prejudice outweigh his daughter's own word, while Rachel accepts his apology beneath a gentle pat, relieved that he finally understands. Her father considers reporting this discovery to the temple, but Rachel urgently begs him not to, knowing they would call her the Saintess again when she insists that role belongs to a princess. Alfred quietly disagrees, reasoning with a blush that Rachel is lovely enough for the title, and although she thanks him, his innocent praise threatens every romantic flag she hoped to break. He takes her hands and declares that, to him, Rachel will always be the Saintess, nearly making her scream because a losing heroine cannot safely invite that kind of devotion. She steadies herself and addresses Alfred seriously, choosing guidance over another panicked denial, asking him to become close with the true Saintess whenever they eventually meet. He agrees easily, then asks to accompany Rachel whenever she returns for more forest training, but she sees no need because white magic cannot harm humans or animals, only monsters. Alfred redirects the request toward his mentor, eager to gain genuine combat experience as well. And her father accepts, explaining that a swordsman's skill must be forged in actual battle. Delighted, Alfred turns back toward Rachel with another bright, expectant smile, promising that this means they can keep exploring and training together in the forest. His happiness leaves her unexpectedly flustered, managing only an uncertain agreement before frantic village defenders rush through the trees and call loudly for the group. Rachel's father meets them first, demanding to know what emergency brought them running, while one breathless man asks Alfred to remain calm and listen carefully, beginning with a dreadful reference to his mother that freezes the boy in place. She has collapsed, coughing blood as her condition suddenly becomes critical. Alfred races home calling for his mother, every trace of earlier happiness gone, and begs the unconscious woman to hold on as he reaches her bedside. Rachel's father questions the gathered villagers, desperate to understand what caused the collapse, but the doctor's grim diagnosis identifies a rare illness with an unforgiving course. The name jolts Rachel's memory, though fear arrives before she can place its significance, because victims die unless a particular flower is brewed into medicine immediately after symptoms appear. The cure is possible once that flower is secured, yet its rarity leaves most patients untreated. And Alfred's father is away working when his family needs him most. Beside the bed, Alfred can only call to his mother through helpless tears, his breaking voice painfully matching the sorrowful child Rachel remembers from the game. That resemblance makes her search the storyline, certain this scene belongs somewhere important, until she recognizes it as the tragedy shown during Alfred's childhood flashback. The adult hero once revealed that his mother died because nobody found the medicinal flower in time, and mourned that discovering it earlier could have saved her life. Rachel's father calls after her, but the realization has already sent her moving, while Alfred looks up from the bedside without understanding where she intends to go. She races outside, breathless and frantic, knowing explanations would waste the little time remaining. Because the game's account said his mother died on the very day she collapsed, Rachel remembers the flower appearing during a hidden event she once uncovered, growing not in some distant land, but inside the forest immediately beside Lent village. Rachel runs toward that memory without slowing, driven by the hours rapidly disappearing behind her, while one thought of Alfred and his grief keeps pulling her deeper into the forest. She cannot bear to see the cheerful boy wearing the devastated expression from his future, because this world has become reality, and everyone she loves is a living person rather than scripted scenery. Rachel silently vows that Alfred's mother will not die while she still has a chance, recalling the hidden flowers should grow deep inside the woods near a lake. Monsters lurk along the route, but urgency leaves her no time to stop and fight. So she follows the concealed passage from the game and presses farther ahead. Her white magic drives nearby creatures away, clearing the dangerous path as she hurries, until a cluster of unfamiliar pale blossoms finally appears beyond the tangled growth. The hidden clearing opens around Rachel in a breathtaking field of softly gleaming flowers, but their beauty cannot distract her from the life depending on her speed. She searches the field carefully, desperate to identify the correct bloom before time runs out, then remembers one distinctive detail that separates the medicine from everything surrounding it. A broad patch of matching flowers stretches before her, raising one hopeful possibility, and closer inspection confirms they perfectly match the plant illustrated in the game's skill notes. Rachel can barely believe such precious medicine grows here in overwhelming abundance. Enough that cultivation research could eventually save countless other patients from the same illness. She decides to reveal the location to the villagers after this immediate crisis passes, but first she must carry the cure home before Alfred loses his mother. Clutching the flower, Rachel races back through the forest and urges herself to move faster, only for one careless step to catch beneath her and destroy her balance. sending her tumbling hard across the ground while the precious medicine remains in hand. Rachel painfully pushes herself upright, believing the fall is her only problem, until an enormous monster emerges above her with its jaws already open. Terror replaces confusion because her monster-repelling magic should have kept every creature away, but the beast lunges before she can understand why that protection failed. Rachel desperately braces against the attack, fighting to keep its crushing mouth away, and reaches for white magic once more as her remaining strength rapidly disappears. Nothing answers her, leaving the frightened girl unable to understand what has happened, until she realizes her magical power is completely exhausted from the journey. The monster looms closer, saliva falling as Rachel lies helpless beneath it. And she wonders whether avoiding the losing heroine route only brought her to an earlier death, dying at 10 years old before she could save anyone or truly change the future. At the last moment, Alfred throws himself between Rachel and the descending monster, shouting her name as the violent rescue tears her free from immediate danger. Rachel can only whisper Alfred's name, stunned that he found her in time, while he gathers her into a fierce embrace and trembles with relief that she survived. Covered in dirt and scratches, Rachel clings to him and answers through shaken breaths, before her father reaches them too, calling her name as she recognizes his voice. His relief immediately becomes fury, and he calls Rachel an idiot for this reckless escape, reminding her that she entered the forest alone immediately after their earlier punishment. Rachel bows her head and apologizes, unable to defend the danger she accepted. While he warns that extraordinary powers do not change the fact that she is 10, she turns to Alfred next, explaining that fear for his mother pushed everything else aside, and the reminder snaps him back toward the urgent crisis still waiting at home. Alfred admits the doctor gave his mother only until today, his voice breaking again because losing either his mother or Rachel would leave him with unbearable grief. She says his name softly, touched by the fear he carried while searching for her, then asks him not to cry and offers the answer hidden in her hand. Alfred stares at the cluster of pale flowers, barely daring to recognize their meaning, as Rachel confirms this is the medicinal plant that can cure his mother's illness. She apologizes again for acting alone, admitting panic left no room to consult anyone, but her father gently praises the kindness behind her choice and regrets shouting so harshly. With no time left, he orders Alfred to run ahead carrying the medicine, while Rachel rides on her father's back so the entire group can hurry home. They reach the crowded house as anxious villagers call out and clear their path, and Rachel's mother rushes forward, overwhelmed with relief at seeing her daughter alive. She pulls Rachel into a tight embrace, scolding through tears before accepting her apology. Then notices the beautiful flowers and innocently asks whether they were gathered as a gift. Rachel explains they are the cure for Alfred's mother, turning the bouquet into urgent medicine, and presents the flowers to the doctor, pleading with him to save the patient. He examines the rare plant in astonishment and demands to know where she found it, but Rachel postpones every explanation, insisting that he prepare the medicine first. The doctor agrees he can make it immediately and tells everyone to wait outside, before shutting himself inside the room to work while the anxious families gather nearby. Alfred asks Rachel whether this truly means his mother will survive, and she takes his hand, promising with quiet certainty that everything will be all right. Still, Rachel can only pray the completed medicine works exactly as the game described. While both families keep vigil around the bed through an unbearable stretch of silence. At last, the doctor emerges with the finished dose and announces that it is ready, then supports Alfred's weakened mother and carefully brings the medicine to her lips. She drinks despite her exhaustion, following his encouragement until the bowl is emptied, while Alfred leans forward and begs his mother to keep fighting through the treatment. The doctor releases a cautious breath, saying they can finally feel some reassurance, and Alfred smiles through tears, grateful beyond words that his mother now has a chance. Rachel knows she has bent the original storyline, yet saving this family can only be right, when the room suddenly smears before her eyes and a frightened sound escapes, leaving Alfred to cry her name as Rachel's vision vanishes and her body gives way before she jolts awake again with one startled breath. Alfred leans over her at once, asking whether Rachel is conscious or still hurting, while she stares from the unfamiliar bed and struggles to understand why she lies there. Her father approaches with visible relief, confirming that she has finally awakened, then asks whether Rachel remembers anything about the moments before her collapse. Alfred explains that she suddenly lost consciousness inside his home after the medicine was delivered. And the doctor finds only magical exhaustion, prescribing one quiet day of complete rest. Rachel's father thanks him deeply as the examination ends without any darker diagnosis, though he still asks whether her weakness truly comes from draining too much magic. Reassured, he gently strokes Rachel's hair and encourages her to sleep a little longer, allowing the warmth of his hand to settle her lingering fear about the blindness. Her mother soon calls him away from the bedside, interrupting his worried hovering and firmly insists that Rachel needs calm rather than another anxious parent watching her breathe. He glances around the crowded room, belatedly noticing how thoroughly everyone has surrounded her, before surrendering under the combined pressure and stepping back from the bed. The women hurry him along with a playful warning, while Rachel wonders why horses entered the argument. Alone with Alfred, she receives his heartfelt thanks and asks whether his mother Lenny has awakened. He says Lenny recently regained consciousness, looks much healthier, and asked him to share her gratitude. Rachel begins refusing any thanks, then pauses as one affectionate wish suddenly occurs to her, requesting another raisin pound cake from Aunt Lenny, whose baking she absolutely adores, and Alfred happily promises to deliver the message, making Rachel celebrate from bed. With another beloved treat awaiting her, Rachel decides recovery should happen as quickly as possible, while Alfred takes her hand and stays beside the bed after everyone else withdraws. His quiet closeness leaves her unexpectedly nervous, especially when their joined hands grow warm and he looks directly at Rachel before confessing that he loves her. She cheerfully says she loves him too, meaning the childhood friend precious to her heart. But Alfred clarifies that she is the person he loves most in the entire world. Rachel assumes his feelings come from gratitude for saving Lenny and chooses not to worry, thanking him with sincere happiness while missing the romantic weight behind every word. Magical exhaustion soon blurs Alfred before her again, and sleep becomes impossible to resist, so Rachel notes the danger of draining herself completely and murmurs goodnight. Alfred answers softly, watching over her as she settles into peaceful sleep, then presses a tender kiss to her forehead and promises they will always remain together. 7 years pass, carrying both children toward the disaster Rachel has spent preparing to change. Now 17, she surrounds a group of monsters with a carefully shaped defensive barrier, then compresses the enclosed space, steadily forcing every creature toward the center, and celebrates when the experimental technique works exactly as she intended. Rachel proudly calls Alfred over to witness the monsters trapped inside her barrier, before tightening the spell further and closing the prison around them, only to discover that compressed monsters create a far messier result than expected, prompting Alfred to observe that Rachel pushed her clever new technique much too far. He offers his hand and asks whether the messy recoil left Rachel injured, and she accepts with a grateful answer, comfortable in the partnership they built together. Across 7 years, Alfred has become Lent Village's finest swordsman, perhaps stronger than anyone there, even though the hero's legendary power has not awakened, and his ordinary status already looks remarkable. Rachel has likewise refined white magic into her only weapon, inventing technique after technique, with just 1 year remaining before the monster invasion she has always feared. The creatures destined to attack Lent Village should be much stronger than anything in this forest, but 7 relentless years beside Alfred have convinced Rachel that neither will lose. All that effort was meant to break the blindness flag and protect everyone she loves, before she eventually sends Alfred away as the smiling childhood friend behind the hero. Thinking ahead to that departure, Rachel decides she should prepare him a useful gift, and settles on gathering potion ingredients, since a Demon King journey can never have too many supplies. Her younger sibling suddenly tears her from bed the next morning, shouting that something terrible has happened, while Rachel protests that she was resting at the perfect moment before hearing the warning, a single word that instantly changes everything around her. Monsters. Powerful creatures have appeared outside Lent Village, forcing the defenders into an immediate battle, and her father orders the children to flee while he buys them precious time. Rachel freezes because the invasion should still be an entire year away, since the game placed this event when Alfred was 18 and he is only 17 now, but her sibling urges her to hurry as Rachel wonders why fate suddenly accelerated. Although the broken timeline terrifies her, Rachel refuses to solve that mystery while lives are threatened, and changes into fighting clothes so quickly that her younger brother protests the sudden stripping. Rim explains their father is defending the village's western entrance, where the monsters first appeared, but Rachel tells him to remain at home instead of following her into danger. Rim begs his sister to escape with him, unwilling to leave her behind, until she explains that years of monster training were meant for exactly this emergency. Rachel places one reassuring hand on his head, calming the frightened boy before she leaves, and gives him the vital responsibility of protecting their mother inside the house. She asks Rim to promise, making the request feel more serious than any ordinary chore, while he clenches his small fist and gathers the courage to accept it. Rim swears their mother will be safe with him, allowing Rachel to trust his resolve, and she races toward the western entrance to support her father. There, a massive winged monster snaps at him amid the chaotic village defense, forcing the swordsman to brace his blade desperately across the creature's crushing jaws. Rachel shouts for her father to duck, giving him one instant of warning before blasting the monster away with concentrated white magic from behind him. Her father turns through the debris, stunned that his daughter entered the battle, while Rachel stands ready and answers his shocked call without retreating. He orders her to evacuate, but she declares that she will fight beside him, raising her magic again as another monster surges toward the village defenders. Her father recognizes the spell as healing magic and warns that absorbing a monster's corruption can poison her, but Rachel asks to examine his injured arm before discussing the danger to herself. As she treats the wound, he silently marvels at the capable daughter standing before him, realizing that 7 years of determination have made Rachel far stronger than he understood. She finishes the healing and suddenly wraps both arms around him, overwhelmed by relief, whispering that she is grateful her father survived the moment that once killed him. Rachel apologizes for frightening him, refusing to explain the future death she just prevented, when another scream from deeper inside the village tears their reunion apart. She runs toward the sound despite her father's urgent order to wait, while he warns those monsters are dangerous and tells her to evacuate with everyone else. A wave of dizziness interrupts him, revealing that his condition is worse than he admitted, and Rachel returns as her father sinks down, clutching his head from weakness. She explains that excessive blood loss remains serious even though magic closed his wound, then makes him promise not to overexert himself while he reluctantly agrees. With the next cries approaching, Rachel races onward before another villager is hurt, and spots a familiar figure moving through the chaos with people on his back. Alfred appears carrying two exhausted villagers at once, making Rachel call his name in shock and asks whether she evacuated, while she explains her father is resting nearby. Alfred admits he could never flee while so many neighbors still needed help, and Rachel knows the man he has become can be trusted in this battle. Alfred sets the rescued villagers down, calling one woman by name to check her condition, while Rachel extends healing magic and restores the injuries, slowing their escape. The woman gratefully says she feels better, thanking Rachel for saving her, and Rachel explains that Repulsion already cleared nearby monsters before urging her to evacuate. Once the villager runs towards safety, Rachel and Alfred turn back toward the larger threat, and she announces an adapted spell that reverses monster repulsion into monster attraction. Alfred understands immediately Rachel intends to gather every creature attacking the village in one place, while she watches him carefully, aware that their next move will demand complete trust. He proposes eliminating the entire horde at once, and Rachel accepts the dangerous gamble. Closing her eyes, she concentrates on drawing every hostile presence toward their position, refusing to leave even one monster behind where fleeing villagers could become prey. The spell answers as enormous serpentine creatures close around the pair from every direction, forming a far greater mass of monsters than Rachel expected to confront together. Alfred takes her hand and leads the charge, while she answers despite her nerves, then strikes into the gathered horde before their encirclement can fully tighten. Rachel releases her white magic beside him, crushing another monster beneath the concentrated barrier, but the invasion proves far harder than 7 years of forest training led her to hope, and exhaustion begins catching her at the worst possible moment. Alfred shouts Rachel's name when another creature lunges from outside her attention, warning her to run as its massive jaws descend directly behind her. Rachel understands with one horrified glance that she cannot escape the strike in time. While Alfred screams her name and watches the monster close over her position, he launches forward with his sword drawn, desperation forcing his body beyond every practiced limit, and intercepts the attack in the final instant before it reaches Rachel. Alfred leaps across the creature's body, carrying a new surge of power through his blade, his eyes sharpening with a force Rachel has never seen during their years together, before one decisive slash tears through the monster and ends its attack. Watching that unmistakable radiance around him, Rachel recognizes the phenomenon from the game, though Alfred himself looks at his sword and wonders what just happened. This is the hero's awakening, originally triggered when Rachel lost her sight protecting him, but her near-death has awakened Alfred's destined power 1 year ahead of schedule. He rushes toward Rachel the moment the danger falls, calling for her anxiously, then catches her in both arms before she can even finish saying his name. Alfred trembles against her, whispering that if Rachel ever disappeared, he might lose himself completely, while she assumes he is simply terrified after watching his closest friend nearly die. His unfinished thought sounds far darker without her. He might destroy the entire world, leaving Rachel to repeat his name while Alfred answers with an unnervingly gentle smile. She quickly decides she imagined the threat and dismisses it as another charming gap in his personality, convincing herself the words could not possibly have meant what she heard, while Alfred watches her flustered denial in a brief, strangely peaceful pause. Looking across the silent battlefield, they realize every invading monster has finally fallen and both collapse onto the grass, breathlessly celebrating the victory they earned together. Lent Village is safe, her father lives, Rachel kept her sight, and Alfred survived beside her, making the impossible future she pursued for 7 years feel real at last. She jumps up and triumphantly declares the losing heroine flag completely broken, only to retreat into awkward denial when Alfred asks what she means by losing. Rachel redirects them toward checking the village, where frightened residents may still need help, and returning neighbors call her name as they emerge from shelter with her family. Her mother pulls Rachel into another fierce embrace, grateful to find her unharmed, before Rachel asks everyone for an honest account of the invasion's damage. Her father reports that Rachel and Alfred ended the attack quickly enough to prevent any deaths, although several defenders and villagers remain nearby with injuries requiring treatment. Rachel immediately offers white magic, moving from survivor to healer without pausing, then breathes out once every wounded person receives the care they need. The grateful villagers thank Rachel and Alfred for protecting them, leaving both young heroes humbled, while the neighborhood surveys the houses damaged by an attack nobody expected so early. Families return through the streets together, supporting one another as the immediate panic fades. Rebuilding will take time, but everyone agrees that no house matters more than a human life. And Rachel quietly accepts that truth, relieved by the outcome she once believed impossible. Tomorrow, the village will begin repairing everything together. Tonight, exhaustion finally claims her. Before anyone can rest, approaching hooves announce another group racing into Lent Village, and Rachel turns toward the unexpected arrival, wondering what new trouble has found them. Mounted knights identify themselves as Greinel's Royal Order, searching for someone marked by recently detected power, which Rachel recognizes as the kingdom's highest-ranking military force, appearing far earlier than expected. A dark crest has formed across Alfred's arm, visibly proving the hero's awakening, and the lead knight singles him out the moment that Mark comes into view. He calls it the hero's sign and commands Alfred to accompany them before the king, but Alfred calmly asks what will happen if he simply refuses their summons. Rachel panics because the game's Alfred followed obediently despite his confusion, never challenging the knights like this, while the officer insists refusal is impossible and scolds him for disrespecting such an honor. None of this altered exchange belongs to the story Rachel remembers, leaving her completely lost, as Alfred concludes that no explanation will make the royal knights accept a refusal. He changes tactics and asks whether his childhood friend may travel with him, then directly requests that the knights take Rachel along to the capital. Their leader studies her and asks whether she knows about the monsters that attacked the village, explaining the order received reports of unusually strong creatures but arrived too late to help. Alfred answers that Rachel and he defeated the entire invasion themselves, earning her a skeptical stare that makes Rachel want even less involvement with the crown. Alfred declares he will not leave if she refuses, shocking Rachel with his stubborn ultimatum, then asks whether she hates being with him as the knight questions their incredible victory. Unable to withstand Alfred's wounded expression, Rachel quietly agrees to accompany him after all, and the knight accepts, promising to present both young fighters before his majesty. Rachel forces a composed smile while privately saying farewell to her peaceful, ordinary village life. As the journey carries them from Lent village toward Greinel's distant royal capital, the magnificent castle rises above the road, leaving Rachel openly amazed despite her dread, and its towering spires make the approaching royal audience feel painfully real. Inside, dazzling halls and intricate decorations surround her with an elegance far beyond village experience, while Rachel worries about tracking mud inside until Alfred reminds her that shoes are still expected. Their escort warns they will meet the king immediately and must avoid any disrespect, shocking Rachel because she expected time to clean up before facing royalty in battle-stained clothes. The knight explains that his majesty will not be kept waiting for their comfort, so Rachel reluctantly accepts the audience and wishes she could somehow become presentable. A shadowed announcement marks their arrival as the throne room doors open ahead, and both visitors kneel at the foot of the throne beneath the king's inspection. He calmly orders them to raise their faces, inviting the nervous pair to look up, and Rachel obeys, cautiously meeting Greinel's ruler for the first time. One startled thought escapes when the imposing monarch looks nothing like she imagined, because beneath the enormous beard, the king appears unexpectedly small and almost adorable. He announces that reports of a newly born hero have reached the crown, and Alfred formally gives his name, presenting himself with steady respect before the throne. The king asks whether this handsome young man truly bears a pattern across his arm, and the escorting knight orders Alfred to present the mark for royal inspection. Its dark curling lines leave no doubt. The crest is unquestionably proof of the hero. Greinel's king celebrates that such a figure has emerged within his own realm, then addresses Alfred formally, preparing a request that surprises nobody except its recipient. Ancient legend says the marked hero will defeat the demon king and restore peace, while growing monster attacks have left every kingdom waiting desperately for that savior. The king bows his crowned head and asks Alfred to begin the Demon King campaign, shocking Rachel, who never expected a monarch to lower himself before a village boy. Alfred refuses anyway, unmoved by royal pressure and leaving Rachel horrified by his bluntness. His answer hangs across the vast throne room as every witness struggles to react, and Rachel realizes her childhood friend just rejected what sounds like a royal command. The king quickly clarifies that he expects no unpaid service and promises substantial rewards, but Alfred says money means little if accepting the mission places Lent village in danger. This unexpected concern makes the king brighten as though he has found the perfect answer, and he calls for the princess to enter the audience chamber. A beautifully dressed young woman approaches and offers Alfred an elegant first greeting, introducing herself as Rosa Greinel, princess of the kingdom standing before him. Rachel recognizes Rosa as the game's heroine and saintess, destined to marry Alfred, yet her first overwhelmed reaction is simply that the princess is incredibly adorable. Rachel expects Alfred to fall in love at first sight, exactly as the game promised, but he gives Rosa one flat glance and shows none of the expected fascination. His indifference feels impossible because the original scene left him blushing before the princess's beauty, while the proud king praises his daughter and Alfred merely offers a detached acknowledgement. The king proposes Rosa join the campaign and marry Alfred after the demon king falls, explaining that her white magic makes her a useful saintess, while royal suitors remain scarce. Alfred suggests choosing another candidate, arguing that a loveless marriage would only make both people miserable because he has already settled upon the person he intends to keep in his heart. His gaze slides straight toward Rachel, making her demand why he is suddenly looking at her, then insist everyone has misunderstood before the implication can become explicit. Rosa gently asks whether Alfred and Rachel might already share a romantic relationship, but Rachel panics because the princess should be falling for the hero, not surrendering him. She denies everything with excessive force, physically silencing Alfred before he can contradict her, and Rosa accepts the answer with a polite smile that reveals little. The princess's lingering stare feels painfully sharp, though Rachel hopes the subject has finally closed. until Alfred returns to the marriage problem and refuses to let the king redirect him. He points out that another powerful white magic user already stands inside the room, making Rachel wonder whether the princess could truly be the only possible saintess. She realizes the temple's mandatory report about her affinity apparently never reached the king and blurts out that her white magic can defeat monsters, exposing the secret Alfred tried to protect. The king lights up, delighted by this extraordinary revelation about another white magic wielder, and the knight confirms that Rachel's claimed achievement would be genuinely remarkable. A white magic user who defeats monsters is unprecedented, yet Rachel wants every saintess honor reserved for Rosa, until the king loudly proposes granting Rachel the saintess title instead. She protests that she does not fit the role, fearing how much that title would demand. But he explains it belongs to the finest white magic practitioner, and Rachel clearly surpasses his daughter. Accepting that judgment would overturn the game's romance even more completely than everything already has, when Rosa and Alfred are supposed to share the happy ending as saintess and hero. Rachel finally asks why Alfred seems so unwilling to begin the very journey defining him, and one painful realization connects his resistance to the fate she successfully escaped. Alfred has no revenge driving him because Rachel survived the invasion with her sight intact, leaving him without the original reason that made separation and the Demon King campaign inevitable. She trained to avoid blindness and bereavement, never imagining self-preservation would derail the entire narrative, while the king returns hopefully to naming her saintess and Rachel refuses once more. She wonders whether denying the title could also exempt her from the Demon King campaign, only to realize her new role may matter more than whether Alfred accepts being hero. The king declares a saintess exists precisely to support the hero against the Demon King, meaning Rachel has a sacred obligation to accompany Alfred on the coming journey. He asks whether they truly intend to reject him, hinting that a direct order could force them, then tearfully complains that other kingdoms will blame Greinel if its hero and saintess remain home. Rachel finally agrees to campaign, but only after warning the king that she has conditions, beginning with a demand that he leave the saintess title to the beautiful royal Rosa. She could still obey the mission without the honor, preserving at least one piece of ordinary identity, but the king immediately refuses, leaving Rachel stunned by how firmly he blocks that escape. He explains the title must recognize the greatest white magic user, and anything else would insult Rosa, forcing Rachel to watch yet another pillar of the original story collapse. Rosa kindly tells her not to worry and agrees that Rachel deserves the saintess title, leaving the reluctant candidate with no ally for her increasingly desperate objections. Rachel accepts becoming saintess and joining the campaign, though her surrender remains cautious, and asks permission to state the remaining terms before departure becomes final. She will abandon any impossible danger, values her life above duty, and expects compensation even if they fail, which the king accepts, promising that one honest attempt will satisfy the other kingdoms. Alfred immediately confirms he will go wherever Rachel goes, finally giving Greinel its hero, and the relieved king thanks him warmly for accepting the mission at last. Promised generous rewards and freedom afterward, Rachel celebrates that she can still build a comfortable life, until the king adds Rosa to the party for healing support and valuable experience. The princess bows gracefully and asks both travelers to treat her well, while Rachel feels relieved that the journey will include another woman she already admires. Their fourth member is Greinel's knight captain, whose survival skills cover every practical need on the road, making Rachel welcome his help, especially when the sheltered princess cannot handle ordinary camp chores. The knight captain confirms another detail. Alfred must collect the hero's legendary sword before confronting the Demon King, and that weapon rests inside a sacred shrine along their planned route where he can guide them. With the party settled, the king orders everyone to prepare and depart as soon as possible, then entrusts the kingdom's future to the four travelers gathered before him. Later, Rachel collapses onto a guest room sofa and worries about everything awaiting beyond the castle, especially whether she can safely abandon the mission if danger overwhelms them halfway through. Rosa says the true saintess already exists without her, while the king called this journey valuable royal experience, when Alfred suddenly appears behind Rachel and startles a scream from her. She demands that he knock before entering, furious at being surprised during private thoughts, but Alfred says he knocked repeatedly and heard nothing, making Rachel apologize. He asks why she made the difficult decision to join the campaign at all, and Rachel admits openly rejecting the king could have brought consequences upon her family. The knight captain's earlier warning confirmed that refusing completely might leave her without any protection, so Rachel negotiated permission to retreat and payment for the attempt instead. Alfred accepts the choice because it belongs to Rachel, even if he remains uneasy, then gently covers her hand and says her name with intimate seriousness. He promises to protect her absolutely and asks Rachel to marry him after they return, while she assumes his feelings may still change once the game's true heroine travels beside them. For that reason, Rachel decides she does not need to reject his proposal immediately, and Alfred pulls her into a delighted embrace, celebrating her hesitant answer as a victory. With their destination decided, Alfred grows almost childishly excited to defeat the Demon King quickly, calling the journey a bonus because it lets him remain beside Rachel every waking moment. He eventually falls asleep smiling, no longer saying anything remotely appropriate for a noble hero, while Rachel watches him and quietly wonders whether their future together will truly be safe. Morning brings the party's departure, turning private uncertainty into a public royal farewell. The king clasps Rosa's hands tightly, reluctant to release his daughter into such danger, and tearfully begs his princess to protect herself throughout the campaign. Rosa promises she will, bidding her father goodbye beneath a practical traveling hat. Greinel's ruler entrusts the hero and Saintess to the knight captain and asks everyone for care, while the officer accepts the command with disciplined respect and prepares the route. 3 days after reaching the castle, the four finally depart to confront the Demon King, only for Rachel to discover that their traveling party is painfully, unbearably awkward. Inside the carriage, every companion sits in silence, and nobody attempts a single conversation, so she forces a smile and decides introductions are the safest way to begin. Rachel Urquhart formally presents herself to Rosa as Alfred's childhood friend from Lent Village. And the princess warmly asks whether the two have known each other since childhood. Rosa compares their closeness to siblings and eagerly requests stories about the hero's younger years, which Rachel welcomes, inviting the princess to ask whatever she wants to know. Privately, she remembers that Rosa is the true heroine meant to understand Alfred best, until Alfred cites Rachel's marriage promise, rejects the sibling comparison, and darkly suggests Rim may need eliminating. Rachel hurriedly explains that her sibling remark merely described how much time they spent together, and Alfred laughs, happily agreeing that the two of them have always been inseparable. Listening quietly, Rosa realizes their familiarity sounds far more like a married couple's intimacy, while the increasingly charged atmosphere leaves Rachel flustered and Alfred asking what happened. He studies the princess with sudden caution, sensing something unspoken behind her silence. But Rosa answers with an immaculate royal smile and politely claims nothing is wrong. Rachel can only endure the strange exchange, unsure how her friendly introduction became this tense. With nobody admitting anything, the carriage continues peacefully through the countryside. Their campaign has 3 aims: approach the Demon King's castle, assist towns, and suppress encroaching monsters, so they accept a lumber village's plea after its surrounding forest becomes dangerously overrun. The nearby dungeon is beginner ranked, and its creatures should be weaker than Lent's attackers, allowing the party to clear it easily and receive the villagers' heartfelt gratitude. The village chief rewards them with a local specialty, an enormous wooden bear clutching a fish, and Rachel recalls that the game's Japanese developers occasionally included similarly recognizable cultural curiosities. Although the collectible has no magical effect, she accepts it rather than wound the chief's feelings, discovering that a harmless inventory prize feels much heavier outside the convenience of a game. Living inside this world means every journey carries genuine weight, leaving her exhausted beneath the bear. Later, another impressive estate rises ahead as their carriage approaches its ornate gates, where even the waiting coach gleams with enough decoration to announce wealth and privilege. Rachel admits the surrounding dungeons pose little danger now, but another difficulty clearly awaits inside. Rosa apologizes because her limited magical reserves leave the Saintess carrying their cumbersome reward, yet Rachel gently assures the embarrassed princess that she should not worry about it. Rachel notices that the original saintly heroine withholds healing and support magic only from her, but dismisses the slight because she can manage herself and suffered merely a minor fall. Rosa is effectively still level 1, inexperienced despite the importance of her royal role, while 7 years of preparation have made Rachel strong enough to carry her without strain. Remembering how a heroine should behave, she resolves not to make the princess dislike her. As evening arrives, Alfred suggests they spend the night in the village, and the weary travelers stop before a modest local inn beneath the darkening sky. Inside, the knight captain learns that only 2 rooms remain available for the entire party. The announcement leaves Rosa visibly troubled, though she initially keeps her objection quiet, then reluctantly accepts the arrangement while Rachel notices the princess's unmistakable displeasure. With only 2 rooms the women must share, and Rosa clearly dreads sleeping beside her. Rachel reminds herself this is a Demon King campaign and decides she can endure the discomfort. But Rosa asks for another inn, only to learn the nearest is half a day away. Faced with nightfall and no practical alternative, the princess offers a subdued acknowledgement, while Rachel watches her retreat and searches for a way to preserve the peace. Even the innkeeper looks confused by the noble guest's reluctance and increasingly awkward silence, making Rosa wonder whether Rachel dislikes sharing a room with her just as strongly. To solve everything, Rachel offers to sleep in the carriage using her camping bedroll instead. Rosa brightens immediately at that solution, looking so delighted that her relief becomes impossible to miss, and Rachel quietly congratulates herself for resolving their room problem without open conflict. Alfred refuses, warning that sleeping outside will never restore Rachel's strength after fighting, then offers his own bedroll because she deserves proper rest after doing genuine work. The knight captain observes the dispute silently, recognizing tension beyond simple travel arrangements, while Alfred pointedly contrasts Rachel's effort with someone who withheld magic from only her. She hurriedly scolds him for openly antagonizing royalty and explains that white mages normally remain behind, yet his accusation confirms the princess's behavior was more deliberate than Rachel wanted to believe. Since Alfred noticed it too, Rose's selective coldness must have been painfully obvious, and his protective expression shows he has no intention of overlooking Rachel's mistreatment. Hurt but puzzled, she wonders what offended Rosa, perhaps even her unmistakably rural manners, until the game's original romantic premise suddenly supplies a far more convincing answer. Rosa was supposed to fall for Alfred at first sight, according to her established heroine route. so watching him remain unusually close to his childhood friend would naturally inspire jealousy. Rachel resolves to keep more distance, but Alfred immediately suggests that she share his room instead. She stares at his innocent smile in disbelief, wondering whether he understands his own proposal, before he begins cheerfully arranging for himself and Rachel to sleep together, prompting her to shout that he must stop saying something so scandalous. Alfred recalls their childhood sleepovers and shared baths, while Rachel insists they were tiny children then, but he calls it factual and asks why sharing now should embarrass her, worsening everything. Alfred proposes that Brandon sleep in the carriage so Rosa can have a private room, then turns to the princess and firmly asks whether that arrangement satisfies her. Rosa's tight expression reveals complicated feelings, but she cannot easily challenge the hero's decision. Thus, Rachel ends up sitting alone in Alfred's room, silently stewing over the outcome, and wonders why nobody considered her opinion while deciding where she would sleep. She blames Rosa's stubbornness, though Brandon could certainly have protested more forcefully himself, then fears everyone may assume two unmarried youths sharing a room are already intimate. The thought makes her frustration boil over as she struggles against growing self-consciousness, especially because she still expects Alfred to marry Rosa, despite his emphatic refusal. Alone behind the closed door, Rachel finds the room's quiet even more oppressive, and cannot explain why simply waiting there feels so painfully awkward. Except during early childhood, she has never lodged overnight with a young man, so becoming a little conscious of Alfred's presence seems entirely unavoidable now. He emerges from the bath bare-chested and casually tells Rachel that it is available, making her shriek that he must put some clothes on immediately. Alfred protests that the room is hot, while she insists a maiden still feels embarrassed, then flees toward the bath before his effortless closeness unsettles her any further. Her hurried steps carry her into the washroom, finally placing a door between them where warm water and a long sigh begin loosening the tension inside her. Rachel turns the shower control, hoping solitude will restore her usual composure. She insists Alfred and Rosa's uneasy relationship will eventually become the game's destined romance, but admits her own relentless training has already changed the story by preventing her defeat. Worried that the plot must be restored somehow, Rachel searches for a sensible solution and decides to consult Brandon privately about their romantic complications the following morning. The thought restores her smile, though explaining such impossible knowledge will require considerable care. After bathing, she suddenly remembers another practical problem. Her long, dripping hair then timidly re-enters the room and calls Alfred's name from behind the door. Unable to produce elemental magic, Rachel asks whether he can dry her hair for her, and Alfred responds without hesitation, inviting her closer so he can help. His wind magic dries every strand instantly, an intimate kindness that still feels refreshingly natural. He says family should help each other, eliminating any need to trouble unfamiliar neighbors, though he notes Rachel will face serious inconvenience whenever future travels separate them. She reluctantly concedes he is right, despite disliking the dependency his observation exposes. Most people use fire, water, wind, or earth, making everyday life assume elemental magic, and while tools like matches serve those with poor control, manufacturers treat them as specialty goods. Rachel unhappily remembers that such simple alternatives are also surprisingly expensive, because magic supplies basic needs so cheaply that mundane substitutes have become luxuries. She argues that the king promised enough campaign money for comfortable living and recreation, but matches cannot regulate heat or dry hair, leaving their practical limitations painfully obvious. Resigned, Rachel considers cutting her treasured long hair before it becomes a permanent burden. The suggestion horrifies Alfred, but Rachel explains she cannot keep drying such length alone, so he clasps her hands and declares that he will always handle it himself. When she protests that dependency is a problem, his smiling insistence makes disagreement strangely difficult and Rachel nervously yields, asking him to finish drying the remaining damp strands. Wind curls gently around her hair, sparkling as Alfred guides the warm current with precision, and its pleasant rhythm leaves her drowsy when he softly asks whether she is tired. He says that if she ever cuts her hair, she must entrust the task to him, then warns that nobody else may touch it as Rachel begins drifting into sleep. Alfred watches her peaceful face with a tender blush, enjoying the trust she grants him, and strokes her head while quietly wishing Rachel good night and pleasant dreams. Yet his private smile darkens as he imagines eliminating anyone else who dares touch her. Morning birds gather outside the inn, filling the quiet room with gentle wings and calls, until Rachel's eyes open slowly and she registers unfamiliar warmth beside her. Alfred is still sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the dangerous position they have assumed, because Rachel has somehow ended up trapped against his body beneath the blankets. Her terrified scream erupts loudly enough to shake the entire inn awake. She orders Alfred to release her, pulling frantically against the hand holding her close, but the half-asleep hero murmurs that they should rest a little longer and refuses. His awakened strength makes escape impossible, leaving Rachel helpless against the hero's unconscious grip, while Alfred sleepily calls her soft and fluffy, provoking another mortified shriek. Fully awake, Rachel scolds Alfred furiously while he rubs his eyes and offers good morning, reminding him that they specifically promised to sleep at a respectful distance. Alfred claims he maintained that distance, but sleeping Rachel wandered toward him during the night, and he only embraced her because her restless movements threatened to send her off the bed. Horrified by the possibility of such terrible sleeping habits, Rachel blushes with shame, while Alfred calmly lets her accept his convenient explanation without further evidence. Privately, he finds her immediate trust irresistibly adorable and hides a satisfied smile. The whole party gathers for breakfast, but Rosa mutters that the rustic meal looks unappetizing, then notices everyone's stunned reaction and quickly apologizes for speaking aloud. Since such meals will continue throughout the journey, she resolves to adapt quickly, though she wonders how anything this simple could compare with palace cuisine. Brandon bluntly says that anyone demanding luxury can simply choose not to eat, forcing the flustered princess to deny that she intended any such complaint. Alfred remains visibly angry, taking her disrespect toward the villagers' food personally, because he and Rachel were farm children taught never to waste food and helped cultivate fields. No difference in social upbringing can make Rachel sympathize with Rosa's careless attitude. Yet Brandon tells the hero that the princess will gradually learn these unfamiliar realities. He asks Rosa to accept that campaign life cannot reproduce the royal palace's luxury, and Rachel silently admires his calm, mature ability to mediate between everyone. She requests a private conversation later, disguising her romantic concern as a question about compensation. Brandon agrees to speak after breakfast, and Rachel thanks him with carefully concealed relief. While Alfred asks why he cannot listen and she insists the princess must not overhear. Her secretive mention of compensation makes him suspicious, especially when she warns he would become angry, but Rachel finally meets Brandon beside the carriage and begins the promised conversation. She shocks the captain by announcing that she wants to withdraw from the campaign, insisting she is serious despite their journey having only just begun because she feels obstructive. Rachel argues that hero and princess should travel together, fulfilling what she assumes Rosa desires, and declares that removing herself would give their destined relationship room to grow. Alfred currently devotes everything to Rachel, leaving no possibility for new affection to blossom, but Brandon refuses to relinquish a fighter whose power remains indispensable to their mission. He explains that she must at least accompany them until Alfred obtains the hero's sword, since that weapon is necessary to complete the hero's strength, and Rachel accepts the compromise. She confirms their contract still guarantees payment for withdrawing midway, which Brandon acknowledges. Then Rachel asks him to keep the entire arrangement secret, prompting him to question why, because Alfred would fiercely oppose her departure and might even abandon everything to follow her. Observing the hero's behavior, Brandon admits that such an extreme response is entirely plausible, and promises not to reveal Rachel's plan to anyone else in the party. Reassured, she imagines returning home, rebuilding her family's house, and becoming a dutiful daughter. Rachel runs away from the carriage with buoyant steps, delighted by her newly secured escape, and smiles peacefully as the future once again seems safely under her control. Back in the carriage, Rosa sweetly offers Alfred a drink, but he refuses without warmth, leaving Rachel feeling like a sister witnessing unwanted flirting and wishing they would stop nearby. Her discomfort deepens when Alfred abruptly rises and moves across the carriage toward her, sitting beside Rachel despite her silent panic beneath the princess's unmistakably hostile stare. Rosa masks her irritation behind a soft, beautifully practiced royal smile, and Rachel grows even more alarmed by the deliberate sweetness of that expression. The princess asks the hero to stop using her title and call her Rosa instead, but Alfred refuses immediately, making her question his reason for keeping such distance. He explains that a commoner has no standing to address royalty with casual familiarity, while Rosa argues that the world's only hero should never concern himself with rank. She insists his position equals even a king's and urges him to treat her accordingly, reminding Rachel why the ruler once proposed marriage without caring about Alfred's humble birth. Rosa explicitly invites him to call her by name, but he flatly rejects her again, forcing the princess to abandon subtlety and ask for his familiarity with complete directness. Alfred says he never uses personal names for people he does not consider close, and the explanation strips the smile from Rosa's face, leaving her visibly wounded. She suggests they become close first, but Alfred knows she has underestimated his awareness because he noticed her withholding healing from Rachel and repeatedly glaring whenever Rachel looked away. His expression hardens as the princess's hidden hostility confirms every protective suspicion, and he refuses friendship with anyone who mistreats the childhood companion most precious to him. Rachel softly says Alfred's name, startled by how openly he has defended her. While Rosa hesitates, recognizing that excuses will not erase the hurt she deliberately caused. She apologizes for becoming irritable during her first journey, but Alfred redirects that apology toward Rachel, so Rosa bows deeply, leaving Rachel flustered and begging the princess to raise her head. Rachel assures Alfred that everything is settled and pleads with him not to worsen their relationship, and he finally accepts her request with a visibly reluctant sigh. Rosa renews her invitation, suggesting he may at least address her as Miss Rosa, which Alfred permits, though he firmly refuses her hopeful request to abandon formal speech too. Even that small victory delights Rosa, whose blush reveals how much hearing her name matters. Their carriage continues onward, carrying the uneasy companions toward the next decisive destination, until Brandon announces their arrival at the cave containing the legendary hero's sword. Rachel stares toward the shadowed entrance, realizing the weapon she needs is finally within reach. Alfred calmly asks whether they should enter, prepared to claim the power waiting inside, and the party descends together through thick foliage into the ancient stone cavern. Despite being underground, the shrine feels pure and cool, as though its sealed holiness breathes fresh air, while Rachel's cautious footsteps echo across the smooth floor as they advance deeper. Wonder brightens her face when the heart of the sanctuary finally comes into view, a sword suspended within a luminous spherical seal above an ornate sacred pedestal. Alfred studies the unreachable weapon carefully, his calm expression tightening with determination, then steps close to the seal, ready to test whether it will recognize its hero. His fingertips touch the shimmering surface, sending a small ripple through the suspended sphere. Before radiant power erupts around Alfred and forces everyone else to shield themselves, Rachel covers her face against the dazzling brilliance, peering between her fingers toward him, and watches sparkling light dissolve as the ancient seal finally recognizes its rightful owner. Alfred stands holding the freed sword, its polished blade gleaming perfectly within his grasp, and marvels that every weapon he previously held now feels false by comparison. Brandon smiles with satisfaction, seeing the legendary armament answer the chosen hero exactly as promised, then explains that nobody except the hero can even touch this sacred sword. Its inscription declares Alfred its sole wielder, making it the finest weapon imaginable, and he quietly absorbs the strange certainty that only his hands can command it. Brandon suggests leaving to commission a sheath, surprising Rachel with that overlooked necessity, because the shrine preserved only a naked blade, which would be dangerous to carry openly. The game ignored such practical details, but real travel makes the omission immediately ridiculous. Brandon says craftsmen in a nearby town can make one, and it lies only an hour away. Rachel reacts with delight when their road opens into a vast, bustling urban center, but Brandon warns that it is Greinel's second largest city and orders her not to wander. She remembers her white magic cannot affect humans, leaving her defenseless if criminals isolate her, when Alfred suddenly reaches down and firmly takes hold of her hand. He says he is preventing her from getting lost, while Rachel wonders why Brandon seems annoyed, then promises to protect her from any trouble, leaving the captain to sigh helplessly. Behind them, Rosa radiates such dark jealousy that Rachel senses danger before even turning around, and privately trembles at how frighteningly the princess's whole demeanor has transformed. Rosa nevertheless approaches with a bright smile and asks to remain near the hero too, but Alfred says Brandon protects her while guarding Rachel already consumes both his hands. Rachel whispers that he should show the princess more kindness, hoping to soften their strained bond, and explains that royalty deserves especially careful courtesy when Alfred bluntly asks why. He sees no reason rank alone should earn affection, challenging Rachel's reasoning with unwavering sincerity, and she hesitantly agrees, unable to find a convincing response to his simple principle. Alfred's complete trust makes Rachel fear she has guided him wrongly without realizing it, so she stops pushing before his resistance hardens and waits for a better opportunity. With private discussion now impossible, she concludes that silently slipping away may be her only option. Despite the guilt, because restoring the game's path should secure peaceful village life, Brandon glances toward Rachel as if recognizing that she has reached her decision, and his subtle acknowledgement gives her confidence to proceed with the secret withdrawal. She cheerfully imagines visiting other towns during her return journey, convinced the escape will work, while Alfred watches from nearby with an unreadable expression that threatens her optimism. Rachel packs carefully after bathing, accepting damp hair while confirming she has forgotten nothing, then realizes this departure may mean she never meets Alfred again after tonight. Because they have always been together, that thought brings an unexpected ache of loneliness, but she reassures herself that time and Rosa will eventually fill the emptiness for them both. Rachel slips through the window, hoping to vanish before anyone discovers her secret departure, only to find Alfred waiting outside beneath her, calmly asking where she intends to go. Caught halfway through the escape, she stammers his name and searches desperately for an explanation, then claims she was going nowhere in particular, though his cheerful smile plainly disbelieves her. Alfred asks why she climbed through a window carrying luggage, so Rachel invents carriage organization, and he accepts the bags with suspicious ease, saying he will carry everything himself. Her escape has failed completely, and abandoning all her possessions tonight would make flight impossible. Back inside, Alfred notices her hair remains damp from the recent bath, then takes her hand and says he will dry it before anything else. Thus, Rachel returns to their room under Alfred's watch, officially defeated before leaving the building. Their new lodging is larger, with 2 beds arranged after Rosa demanded different accommodations, while the princess takes pride in having secured the grandest available arrangement for herself. Exhausted by the failed escape, Rachel lets Alfred support her and can only agree weakly as he guides her toward a seat and resumes his familiar evening care. She regrets being caught, yet still loves the patient, comfortable way Alfred dries her hair, and thanks him quietly when the last warm current fades and he announces completion. Seeing his unusually pleased smile, Rachel cautiously calls his name and waits for an explanation. She suggests they sleep and asks him to return elsewhere, but Alfred immediately refuses, arguing that 2 beds solve everything until Rachel protests that unmarried young adults cannot share rooms. Alfred realizes with sudden interest that she finally sees them as a man and woman. Flustered, Rachel tries to deny that realization matters, but Alfred immediately asks what she means, noting they shared yesterday without trouble, while she insists tonight's separate rooms remove every excuse. He ignores the argument, announces he will bathe, and leaves Rachel protesting behind him. Alone, she finally confronts Alfred's unmistakable devotion and wonders how their relationship changed so completely. Perhaps saving his mother explains his gratitude, yet the original Rachel suffered abandonment despite everything. But these are no longer game pieces. The people Rachel loves now live as genuine reality. That truth leaves her holding her head, trapped between remembered destiny and present affection because she feels no personal attachment to either the saintess role or the supposed hero route. Rachel only wants a peaceful life, yet even that modest desire now seems impossible, while Alfred's quiet presence keeps drawing her toward feelings she refuses to name. Unable to reconcile duty, escape, and love, she wonders what choice remains available. Before Rachel can explain herself, Alfred pushes the two beds together and prepares their night, then reaches toward her with familiar confidence, erasing the distance she tried to preserve. Somehow she falls asleep peacefully within Alfred's arms, held securely against his chest until morning. When they leave together, Rosa encounters them outside and instantly notices their suspicious closeness, making Rachel panic that the princess witnessed both emerging from the same room. Her escape home is thwarted, and the carriage carries her onward toward the next mission. Alfred confirms they will establish protective barriers in each city while approaching the Demon King's castle, and Rachel eagerly declares that this is finally the princess's opportunity to contribute. Rachel claims that conventional barrier magic is one of her own weakest disciplines, which is technically true because she only excels at twisting barriers into offensive magic. She argues Rosa could earn recognition as the rightful saintess by accomplishing this great protective work, and the delighted princess volunteers to take responsibility for raising every city barrier. If Rosa fulfills that role, Rachel can surrender the saintess title and leave without obstructing anyone, though she still has no idea how to escape Alfred's constant watch. She cautiously asks whether he overheard her private conversation with Brandon at the inn, and Alfred answers that he will abandon the campaign too if Rachel ever disappears. Though he denies eavesdropping, his declaration proves Rachel cannot safely leave him with Brandon alone, and she imagines the captain regarding her like an unruly child who creates endless trouble. Alfred reminds her he accepted the journey only because she joined, making his withdrawal completely natural. Yet he is the game's central hero, and abandoning this vital campaign could doom the world, because monsters keep multiplying and may eventually overwhelm Lent Village despite every royal reward. Rachel knows peace depends upon success, even while changing the original story's flow frightens her. At last she promises Alfred that she will continue traveling beside him, and he smiles. Rachel abandons escape for now, shifting her attention toward connecting Alfred with the princess instead. So she turns to Rosa and asks her earnestly to handle the coming barrier. Rosa responds with a radiant smile, pleased to receive responsibility befitting the heroine she wants to become. The carriage rolls onward as their newly divided roles settle into place, until Brandon announces their arrival and the party gathers beside the waiting coach. He leads them toward a natural site where the barrier's core cannot be easily destroyed by human hands. Before reaching it, powerful monsters burst from the forest and charge the startled party, forcing Alfred to intercept their attack with the newly claimed hero's sword. Rachel thrusts both hands forward and unleashes repulsion magic through the advancing creatures, but realizes these monsters have already grown far stronger than those from their earliest battles. Rosa offers Alfred healing after the fight, showing a welcome change in her willingness to contribute. While Rachel watches quietly, noticing how quickly the princess's attention returns exclusively toward him. She heals her own scrapes with white magic, grateful that she can restore herself independently, though that very independence makes her wonder whether joining the campaign was ever necessary. Once everyone recovers, they continue through the trees toward the hidden barrier site, discovering a small ivy-covered shrine containing a solitary chalice within its dark recess. Brandon asks Rosa to approach the shrine and channel white magic into its vessel, so the princess steps forward carefully while the others wait among the surrounding trees. She extends her hands toward the chalice, attempting to awaken the settlement's protective barrier, but Rachel soon notices that nothing whatsoever has happened around them. Sweat gathers on Rosa's face as she struggles unsuccessfully to produce the required power, until she admits that her magical reserves appear to be completely exhausted. The entire party cries out in disbelief, stunned that their designated caster cannot begin. Rachel cannot understand how Rosa is empty when the princess barely participated in combat, then realizes she lavished excessive healing upon Alfred while giving Rachel nothing despite her effort. That selfish misuse of their limited magic finally ignites Rachel's own visible anger. She exhales heavily, realizing resentment cannot leave an entire settlement defenseless, and reminds herself that although she was never the intended saintess, she still possesses white magic. With no alternative, Rachel steps before the shrine and channels her own power into it, sending a towering column of brilliant light upward as the barrier surges across the region. The oppressive presence of nearby monsters disappears, confirming that her improvised attempt succeeded completely. Alfred embraces her shoulders and praises her achievement, while Rachel thanks him with a weary smile. She dislikes taking Rosa's accomplishment, but protecting lives makes the interference unavoidable, and asks the princess not to look wounded because Rachel genuinely intended her to receive credit. Since sunset is approaching, Brandon orders the party to make camp in the forest, where darkness settles over the protected trees and closes their exhausting day. Dinner is served around the campfire, filling bowls with steaming meat and broth, and Rachel delights in how unexpectedly tender, rich, and delicious the food tastes. When she asks what meat they are eating, Brandon reveals it came from their monster attack. Every younger traveler freezes, staring across the fire in collective horror at that answer, while Rachel remembers the enormous dark creature that charged them earlier that afternoon. Brandon considers wilderness self-sufficiency obvious, but she knows absolutely nothing about cooking monsters. He explains monster flesh can be drained and preserved, making durable food essential for expeditions, and Rachel keeps eating because the unsettling truth cannot overcome the genuinely pleasant flavor. Rosa fares worse, turning pale and trembling when Rachel asks whether she feels well, making Rachel conclude that eating a slain monster was understandably too harsh for a sheltered princess. After dinner, Alfred calls Rachel aside while she clears the bowls near the fire, insisting he can handle cooking duties too instead of leaving every practical task to others. A blush crosses his face as he gathers courage to say what truly brought him closer, and Alfred begins asking Rachel for a private conversation, only to be interrupted. Rosa steps between them before his sentence can finish, claiming Rachel's attention for herself and asks to borrow her immediately, promising Alfred their talk will end quickly. When he calls his own subject important, Rosa smiles and says hers is equally serious, leaving Alfred to grant reluctant permission while watching the princess with guarded suspicion. Rosa leads Rachel away from the campsite and deeper along a moonlit forest path, where their steps carry them beyond the others, hearing into the dark undergrowth. Rachel grows uneasy about how far they have walked and wonders what Rosa intends, until the princess stops and asks a question that instantly shatters every assumption. Rosa asks whether Rachel plans to derail the scenario, then identifies her as another reincarnator. Since nobody should know Rachel's past life, she wonders what behavior exposed the impossible truth, before a far more shocking explanation suddenly becomes undeniable. Rosa herself is also reincarnated, meaning the game's original heroine carries memories from another world. She confirms it proudly and reveals that she completed this game many times before dying because Alfred was her favorite character, making reincarnation as his princess feel like perfect fortune. Yet her dream romance has gone disastrously wrong, and Rosa's happiness twists into fury as she accuses the supposed losing heroine of interfering with the route and obstructing her victory. Rachel denies stealing anything, insisting she still intends the hero to marry Rosa, but the princess cites their repeated shared rooms, while Rachel blames Alfred and denies romance. Rosa threatens to eliminate her if anything has happened, revealing how frighteningly possessive she feels, and Rachel nervously assures her there is truly no secret relationship to uncover. The princess reveals she overheard Rachel planning to leave after the sword, explaining her recent kindness, yet calls Rachel manipulative when she says Alfred refuses to release her despite wanting departure. Rosa cannot understand why her beloved hero favors someone she considers so cold and unworthy, until Rachel asks whether she genuinely fails to recognize the reason Alfred distrusts her. Before explaining further, Rachel raises a finger and asks Rosa to consider one additional truth, demanding that the princess examine her own conduct before blaming anyone else. She asks whether Rosa could like someone who repeatedly mistreated a precious lifelong friend, especially while that person openly flattered their crush and displayed jealousy instead of fulfilling responsibilities. Rachel addresses Rosa gently as a princess now, giving the accusation room to settle, then explains that she never wanted to steal the heroine's place for herself. She only wanted to avoid the losing heroine's miserable fate and escape unnecessary suffering, while still believing Rosa owns the saintess position and should become the real heroine. Hearing this, the princess begins understanding that Rachel merely tried to evade tragedy rather than compete, and Rachel admits she genuinely wants Alfred and Rosa happy, valuing her childhood friend's future most. Rosa finally says she understands, bringing Rachel enormous relief after their dangerous confrontation, and the princess's hostility visibly fades, allowing both reincarnators to reach a fragile understanding. Seizing the opening, Rachel raises a finger and asks what Rosa intends next, so the princess clasps her hands and demands help winning the hero's genuine mutual love. Startled by the direct alliance proposal, Rachel agrees before fully considering what it requires, and happily declares that she and Rosa have finally become true friends. Their strategy begins with lowering hostility and awakening Rachel's enthusiastic matchmaking instincts to unite the pair, all to strengthen Rosa and Alfred's bond while eventually freeing Rachel from the campaign. Back in town, Alfred asks Rosa whether she properly apologized for every insult toward Rachel, explaining that he heard about the princess's previous disrespect and wants explicit confirmation. Rosa answers sweetly that she has, deliberately addressing Rachel with newly affectionate politeness, while Rachel supports the claim enthusiastically beneath Alfred's skeptical stare. He studies both women in silence, clearly unconvinced by their abrupt transformation, then sighs, unable to challenge the reconciliation if Rachel genuinely accepts it. Alfred says the matter is fine as long as Rachel remains comfortable with Rosa, so she suggests he escort the princess around town, though he asks why Rachel cannot. Rachel secretly rejects that alternative because the entire operation requires deepening Alfred and Rosa's intimacy, then invents an errand, only for him to suspect she is attempting another escape. She counters that Rosa may exhaust herself raising the barrier, so Rachel should accompany them too, convincing Alfred that guarding their important duty makes the shared outing reasonable. He confirms Rachel truly permits him to walk with the princess, and she eagerly agrees, then recommends a famous local cafe as their first carefully selected romantic destination. Alfred and Rosa walk toward the cafe together while Rachel discreetly trails behind them, and the elegant storefront promises exactly the refined atmosphere her matchmaking plan requires. Rachel peeks through a window from outside, determined to monitor every romantic development unnoticed. Having reserved privacy beforehand and arranged desserts matching the couple's tastes with meticulous support, Rosa settles confidently into the prepared booth and begins ordering from the curated menu, but Alfred abruptly rises and leaves her sitting alone before any intimacy can develop. Rachel panics when he exits by himself, realizing her carefully engineered date has collapsed immediately. Alfred spots her hiding nearby and calls her name before she can disappear, then asks whether her errand is finished while Rachel demands to know where Rosa went. He answers simply that he left the princess inside, stunning Rachel with his indifference. Rosa insulted the waiter and complained about the food, confirming she disrespects others beyond Rachel, so Alfred sees no point remaining at the cafe despite Rachel's desperate matchmaking calculations. She collapses in frustration, wondering how anyone can raise his affection under these conditions, while Alfred gently pats her head, mistaking her romantic despair for ordinary disappointment. Since they are already out, he invites Rachel to explore the unfamiliar town together, and she reluctantly agrees, though guilt makes her remember the princess they abandoned. Alfred takes her hand and pulls her forward before Rachel can return for Rosa, warning they must hurry if they want to see everything before nightfall. Their wandering reveals another unmistakable influence from the game's Japanese creator, who apparently loved festival treats enough to fill this fantasy town with familiar street food. Rachel eagerly samples nostalgic sweets unavailable in Lent, rediscovering excitement she thought Reincarnation had erased, until Rosa appears behind them with a terrifying expression and demands an explanation. She says Alfred should be dating her, yet instead Rachel is happily enjoying his company, prompting Rachel to silence the accusation before the hero overhears their reincarnated conspiracy. Rachel privately protests that she arranged everything for Rosa, only to have the opportunity wasted, but the princess instead asks why Rachel remains in this place at all. Confused by the hostility returning so suddenly, Rachel can only ask what Rosa means, and hears that the original losing heroine should be living inconveniently and alone back in Lent. Rachel argues that any reincarnator would prevent such suffering, while Rosa demands obedience to the scenario. She blames Rachel for disrupting the entire story, but Rachel never believed changing tragedy was wrong, recalling how she even asked the temple priest to suppress her white magic report after awakening. Rosa's subdued reaction reveals that this forgotten report carries far greater significance than expected, because temple officials actually informed the palace that another young white magic user had appeared. Since only one saintess should exist, the king might have selected Rachel over his daughter, so Rosa secretly erased that report to preserve her exclusive claim upon the role. Rachel finally understands why the throne knew nothing about her, horrified that Rosa manipulated the records. When asked why, the princess says becoming the saintess naturally required eliminating every rival possibility, because she believes this world exists to unite herself with the hero she loves. Rosa cannot understand why Rachel keeps interfering with that divinely guaranteed conclusion, while Rachel insists survival is not interference and asks what else she should have done. Rosa describes the original ending, where Rachel tearfully blessed the mutually loving hero and princess, then rages that everything should have followed that promised route exactly. She demands to know why Alfred now looks only at Rachel instead of his intended heroine, while Rachel quietly admits she also wants to understand what created his overwhelming attachment. Rosa then condemns her for saving Alfred's mother, proving she remembers Lenny's original fate too, and calls that act another needless intervention that disrupted the route. According to the princess, preventing Lenny's tragedy erased an important hero event from the story, leaving Rachel stunned that Rosa measures a life merely as missing scenario content. She asks whether Rosa truly believes Alfred's mother should have died for proper progression, despite knowing how to save a woman who had lovingly lived among their village neighbors. Rosa dismisses Lenny as nothing more than an extra without meaningful importance. In her worldview, only characters named by the game count as lids, while everyone else remains disposable. Even her royal father is simply an extra because he exists only to support the heroine. Rachel shouts that none of these living people can be reduced to background characters because they have blood, emotions, relationships, and struggle earnestly through each day. This may resemble a game world, but it is also reality where everyone genuinely lives, making it a shared world rather than a stage with two protagonists and countless expendable servants. Rosa mocks her inability to separate game from reality, insisting the distinction should be obvious, and her expression hardens when Rachel refuses to accept that cold interpretation. Rachel counters that real people hold free conversations, unlike scripted figures limited to predetermined dialogue. Rosa insists she only expected the losing heroine to offer support before leaving the route. But Rachel says she did want to bless Alfred's future despite remaining trapped by the scenario, because avoiding tragedy and living peacefully was the original shape of her modest hope. Yet the princess's cruelty has exposed a moral boundary Rachel can no longer ignore, even as Rosa demands complete cooperation because her union with the hero is supposedly correct. Rachel finally tells her to stop, ending the matchmaking alliance she once welcomed. When Rosa asks why, Rachel plainly refuses to support her any longer, because she cannot entrust someone as precious as Alfred to a person with Rosa's values. Whatever purity the game assigned its saintess, reality has revealed a selfish woman Rachel rejects, and unless Alfred truly loves that person, Rachel promises to prevent their marriage herself. Rosa explodes, accusing the losing heroine of stealing the hero who was meant to desire her. then exhales slowly as fury settles into a chillingly deliberate decision. Raising her hand, she admits she anticipated that their confrontation might end this way, while Rachel braces herself and realizes the princess intends something far worse than argument. Rosa smiles and says Rachel only needs to die for the scenario to recover. The princess lunges, forcing Rachel to throw up both arms in desperate defense. But white magic cannot attack humans, leaving Rachel confused when an unfamiliar force surrounds her. Her body lifts from the ground as the spell tears her away from the forest, and Rosa reveals teleportation magic capable of sending objects or people to distant locations. She calls it another white magic exploit and boasts that only its one daily limit inconveniences her. Rosa notes white magic cannot injure humans, but teleportation lets others dirty their hands instead. And when Rachel demands her destination, the princess only wishes her an enjoyable journey. With a cruel smile, she bids farewell to the losing heroine she believes she has defeated, while Rachel's body vanishes completely beneath the spell's irresistible pull. Her scream tears across the distance as the familiar forest disappears around her, and elsewhere Alfred abruptly stops, sensing something wrong while still holding the hero's sword. He opens the nearby door and searches outside, unable to find Rachel where she should be, then calls her name into the gathering darkness with growing fear. Rachel crashes painfully onto a hard interior floor when the teleportation finally releases her, and rises trembling, trying to determine where Rosa has sent her. The vast chamber resembles an opulent hotel lobby or even a richly decorated royal castle. But Rosa's promise that she should die confirms the beautiful surroundings conceal immediate danger. Rachel rushes toward the doors, knowing she must escape before anyone discovers her, only to encounter a human-like resident whose presence in this hidden place makes no sense. Pointed ears and striking red eyes immediately mark him as something other than human, followed by enormous black horns that reveal the terrifying identity Rachel never expected to meet. The elegant horned man before her is the Demon King himself, calm and imposingly regal, and Rachel realizes Rosa teleported her directly into enemy hands rather than simply abandoning her. She has landed inside the Demon King's fortress, the campaign's ultimate destination and most dangerous stronghold, where armored demon guards seize her before Rachel can take another step. The guards crowd around, wondering why a human woman appeared inside their sealed fortress. While Rachel fights panic and desperately searches for any possible escape, she considers blasting white magic and running, but has never tested whether it affects demons, leaving her helpless before the silent Demon King as every uncertain choice becomes dangerous. One guard asks their ruler what should be done with the unexpected captive, and the Demon King studies Rachel thoughtfully before allowing a faint, curious smile. To everyone's surprise, he orders the guards to release her restraints immediately. Even his soldier questions the decision, but the ruler calls Rachel harmless and pitiable, reasoning that an assassin would attack him directly instead of standing there utterly confused. The guards obey and free Rachel, who answers their command with frightened politeness. She rubs her aching wrists until the Demon King quietly summons her attention, then commands the young woman to follow him deeper into the fortress. With no safer alternative, Rachel trails behind his flowing coat through the grand halls, entering an enormous throne chamber lined with towering shelves and stately columns. When he addresses her as young lady, Rachel startles and answers too loudly, before the Demon King asks how she managed to enter his impenetrable stronghold. Rachel says a saintess teleported her, using the game's title without revealing their reincarnated secret, then worries demons may hate saints and regrets identifying her enemy so carelessly. Since the demon realm has avoided human contact for years, she cannot assume their definitions match, and confirms that by saintess she means a woman capable of white magic. Everything Rachel learned portrayed demons as cruel human enemies who create monsters and pursue extermination. Yet the rational people before her resemble humans almost completely aside from their horns. The Demon King knows white magic heals, but even he has never heard of teleportation, while Rachel remembers Rosa neglecting fundamentals and failing the saintess role she wanted so desperately. She explains that another white magic user sought the title and teleported Rachel somewhere she would die, only for the Demon King to address her suddenly, interrupting the furious recollection. Rachel decides honesty is safest while her life remains completely dependent upon his judgment. Nevertheless, this composed ruler is the game's final boss and the supposed source of every monster, making her flinch when his attention sharpens and he steps down from the throne. The Demon King studies Rachel's face with unreadable intensity, saying nothing as he approaches, while she braces for execution, knowing humanity considers his kind an unquestionable enemy. Rachel cannot defeat him now, so she resolves to watch for the smallest opening and flee. He closes the remaining distance without warning, making her cry out in terror, and she squeezes her eyes shut, convinced immediate death has finally arrived. Instead, a gloved hand lands gently atop Rachel's head in a reassuring pat, leaving her staring upward in speechless confusion at this impossible tenderness. The Demon King calls her tiny and guesses she is perhaps 13, separated from her parents, and Rachel realizes with burning embarrassment that he has mistaken the 17-year-old for a child. He wonders what kind of saintess would send such a young girl into the demon fortress, then orders Nico to provide Rachel food, a bath, and bedding before ending the audience. Rachel leaves the throne room still clutching herself, stunned that she received no punishment. and can barely believe the Demon King released a human intruder without any reprimand. When someone gently checks on her, Rachel answers that she is fine and offers sincere thanks. The demon maid introduces herself as Nico and explains that she will personally care for Rachel, adding that such a small guest need not use formal speech, though Rachel politely prefers it. Nico offers food first, but Rachel says she already ate and chooses the bath instead. Being treated completely like a child frustrates Rachel, yet correcting them could create danger, because revealing she is 17 might expose other lies before she understands this fortress. All caution briefly disappears when Rachel beholds the magnificent bathing chamber and cries out in wonder, delighted by an enormous bath grander than anything she ever dreamed of using. She enters alone, amazed that the entire luxurious space has been reserved exclusively for her, and happily washes beneath the steam, humming as tension finally leaves her body. Sinking one foot into the warm water, Rachel releases a long, deeply satisfied breath, though she reminds herself to escape before the demons discover she is no helpless child. A faint sound beyond the steam interrupts her planning and makes Rachel look up sharply, because someone has entered the room despite Nico saying the bath was reserved. If seen naked, Rachel's supposed age might be exposed, and she simply refuses public embarrassment, so she jumps from the water and hastily wraps herself in a towel. Rachel shouts for the intruder's identity while a shadow advances through the thick steam, then panics over whether to confront, hide, or flee before whoever approaches reaches her. The intruder emerges through the steam, revealing a composed man already preparing to bathe, and Rachel nearly drops her towel upon recognizing the bare-chested Demon King. Both stare silently across the water, their unexpected meeting suspended in unbearable awkwardness before he calmly sits in the bath as though nothing unusual has occurred. The ruler tells Rachel to sit before she grows cold, and she obeys weakly. They soak side by side in silence, separated by only a painfully short distance, while Rachel wonders why she did not scream and flee the instant he entered. She asks whether mixed bathing is normal here, but he says men and women usually separate, explaining this bath simply lies closest to his own chambers within the enormous fortress. He personally ordered Nico to let Rachel use it, believing that arrangement most convenient, and she finally realizes she has occupied the Demon King's private bathing room. He confirms it without concern, calling the space needlessly large enough to share comfortably, because he expected Rachel to eat first and accidentally overlapped, promising better scheduling later. His words imply continued care, reassuring Rachel that she may survive at least another night, but relief gives way to a shy stare at the striking man beside her. Steam purls across his face as the Demon King notices Rachel watching him, and the dangerous closeness of his bare body makes her gaze drift lower despite herself. She retreats into the water, overwhelmed by a beauty far more potent outside the game screen, muttering that the sight is poisonous to her eyes while her face burns bright red. The puzzled Demon King leans closer and asks why the young lady is behaving strangely. His face moves dangerously near Rachel's, making her protest that he is far too close, but the ruler only wonders whether she has a fever, noting children catch chills easily. He orders Rachel to remain still while inspecting her condition through the heavy steam, and she manages one dazed reply before the heat and embarrassment overwhelm her. Rachel later awakens in a soft bed with Nico watching attentively beside her, and immediately covers her nose, checking whether attraction caused an humiliating nosebleed. Finding no blood brings enormous relief, though the truth remains impossible to explain. Nico offers water while Rachel silently remembers fainting after admiring a naked man. The Demon King appears nearby and says he carried her there, startling Rachel completely, because she imagines him transporting her nearly naked from the bath and dissolves into panic. He explains Nico dressed her after arrival, indicating Rachel remained covered during the journey, then calls her far too light and orders the growing child to eat larger meals. Hearing herself labeled a child again leaves Rachel clutching the borrowed nightgown in defeat, until she looks toward Nico and notices the maid's dramatically fuller figure, whose unmistakable curves provide a brutally direct comparison with Rachel's own body. Rachel reluctantly admits that beside Nico she truly does look like a child. The Demon King finally asks the young lady's name, so she introduces herself as Rachel. He gives his own name as Winfried, leaving Rachel uncertain whether to address him as Majesty. Winfried says children need no honorifics and invites her to use his name plainly, while Nico asks whether Rachel needs anything else and offers to leave water nearby. Since the hour is late, Rachel tells Nico to rest instead of remaining on duty, and the maid leaves a small bell for summoning help whenever Rachel needs something. Magic connects the bell directly to Nico, ensuring its sound will always reach her, so Rachel can call without considering distance or time before the maid departs. Alone, Rachel reflects that one day transformed her from traveler into resident of the enemy fortress, yet Winfried has behaved like an unexpectedly ordinary and genuinely kind man. She settles beneath the blankets, still unable to reconcile that kindness with the game's villain. Since nobody here has harmed her and the ruler may simply adore children, making Rachel wonder whether everything she believed about demons was fundamentally mistaken. That unsettling possibility follows her into sleep as she questions her own understanding of this world. The fortress towers greet her the following morning beneath a peaceful, bright sky, when Rachel enters breakfast and cries out at the breathtaking spread waiting before her. Pasta, roasted meat, fresh vegetables, rich sauces, and wine cover the glittering table, while Winfried urges her to eat freely because growing children require abundant food. Rachel wonders whether the Demon King shares surprisingly ordinary tastes, especially for human-style meals, then cuts into a beautifully glazed hamburger steak chosen from the feast. Bursting juices and fragrant demi-glace make the fortress breakfast so delicious that Rachel declares it perfect. And Winfried smiles softly, telling her to enjoy every bite at leisure. She enthuses that the flavor is extraordinary and her cheeks might simply melt away, while Nico says the chef will rejoice because Winfried normally reacts to meals with little emotion. Winfried says the chef expresses every feeling through food, so such delicious effort deserves recognition, and Rachel finishes by thanking everyone respectfully for the wonderful meal. She then gathers courage and asks permission to visit the nearby demon town, prompting Winfried to consider the human girl's unusual request in thoughtful silence. He agrees, deciding that allowing her to look around creates no particular danger, and assigns Nico as her guide, telling the maid to show Rachel through town. Rachel blurts out surprised that he granted permission so easily, confusing Winfried, because she expected her human identity alone to make every demon suspect espionage. Winfried asks whether she considers herself a human spy, but Rachel strongly denies it, although mutual hostility between demons and humanity makes ordinary suspicion understandable. He explains sensitive places remain magically sealed, and human magic cannot open demon locks anyway, startling Rachel with the revelation that the two peoples use magic through fundamentally different systems. Nico says humans rely upon natural affinities, while demons study magical techniques called magic arts, leaving Rachel fascinated by a discipline she never encountered anywhere in the game. The maid calmly retrieves a piece of paper and prepares a simple demonstration, drawing a precise magical circle and symbol across its surface with a pen, then summons a small flame above her palm merely by activating the completed design. Nico explains anyone can learn this foundation, while advanced applications even permit remote operation, proving demon civilization surpasses human magic and that Rachel's prior beliefs remain deeply inaccurate. With nothing left to lose, she decides to gamble upon asking one dangerous question. Rachel asks why demons create monsters and use them to attack humanity, confronting the central justification behind the game's entire Demon King campaign. The human story claimed demons controlled monsters and plotted invasion, but never explained their motive, making Rachel suspect some crucial reason may have been hidden from the player. Winfried's confused response reveals that even the accusation itself sounds completely foreign to him, and Rachel stares back, equally surprised that he does not understand her question. He finally asks whether she truly believes his people are attempting to invade humanity, while Rachel points out that such conquest seems unnecessary when this realm already prospers. Winfried explains monsters arise naturally, and demon patrols must hunt them constantly too, meaning demons neither hate humanity nor escape the same creatures threatening human settlements. The game presented only humanity's viewpoint and excluded every fact from the demon side, even having Winfried ask why armed humans entered his fortress when the party arrived. Rachel realizes his question may have been sincere because demons never attacked them deliberately. And Nico apologizes that Winfried correctly predicted humans would eventually assume the worst. This unexpected history leaves Rachel struggling to reconcile another enormous contradiction, as Nico explains demons were originally one distinct people living among humanity before relations collapsed. Winfried clarifies that demons themselves were once considered a human ethnic group, but differences in appearance and magic brought persecution, forcing them to flee into distant isolation. Rachel finally understands how two related peoples became separated by fear and inherited prejudice, while Nico insists they remain fundamentally human despite belonging to a different race. Rachel explains that human kingdoms still teach demons possess the ability to create monsters, which astonishes Nico enough to treat the misconception as an enormous historical problem. Rachel sighs, realizing the supposed enemy is not inherently evil and the campaign rests upon deception. While the humane demons around her provide living proof against centuries of propaganda, Winfried suggests human leaders historically portrayed demons however political convenience demanded, inventing an external enemy to redirect public anger and preserve stability within their own kingdoms. He acknowledges that discovering such cynical manipulation naturally makes Rachel angry, but cautions this happened long ago and even the current human king may not know. Modern humanity simply inherited those beliefs until prejudice became unquestioned common knowledge, yet that means defeating Winfried would never stop monsters from appearing across the world. The game ended with the Demon King's defeat and never showed what happened afterward, making Rachel wish she had played a sequel explaining the demon realm's hidden truth. Winfried then reveals that an actual method exists for permanently eliminating monsters. Since demons themselves suffer from those creatures and have studied the problem for generations, the necessary instrument is the hero's sword now carried by Alfred, forged by ancient humans to pierce the monster's source and stop new creatures from being born. Only the chosen hero can wield it, leaving demons able to manage outbreaks but never end them. Rachel remembers Alfred driving the sword into the ground during the game's unexplained final sequence, and groans that the original story concealed far too much behind a meaningless visual. Most importantly, Winfried says the demons know the precise location of the monster's source. Rachel concludes that once Alfred arrives with the sword, the monsters can truly be eliminated, although Rosa teleported her here while the journey remains early, leaving many weeks before his arrival. She sighs beneath the weight of waiting, uncertain what the human party will do meanwhile. Until Nico ends the grim discussion and announces they should prepare for their town visit. Rachel's shoes finally touch the clean cobblestones outside the fortress gates, and she shields her eyes in wonder at the bright, peaceful demon settlement. Surprised to see Winfried accompanying them, Rachel asks whether he wanted to join the outing, and he explains his subordinates ordered the overworked ruler to rest, making this perfect timing. Rachel accepts his company gratefully, pleased to have both Winfried and Nico guiding her. Their tour begins with a refreshing drink, which Rachel eagerly tastes through a straw, discovering rich, vivid orange flavor unlike anything available in her isolated hometown. Colorful stalls and unusual merchandise surround her, awakening a child's genuine excitement despite every danger, while Winfried observes that she looks happy and Rachel praises the astonishing variety of shops. The busy castle town resembles human streets, further erasing the terrifying demon image she inherited. Winfried quietly orders Nico to purchase every item that catches Rachel's attention, leaving the maid buried beneath packages while Rachel protests she never requested so much. Though secretly delighted, she wonders whether Rosa might also sabotage the royal payment Rachel was promised, but Winfried says he will pay and should finally spend some of the wealth he endlessly saves. Nico reveals her ruler has no hobbies, making everyone grateful that spoiling Rachel gives him joy, so the embarrassed guest thanks them while Winfried and Nico smile at her happiness. Dressed in her new finery, Rachel cannot help feeling a little like a princess herself, twirling happily as flowers and ribbons make the unfamiliar dress feel wonderfully extravagant. Yet the thought of royalty reminds her to wonder what the real princess is doing. Rachel doubts Alfred would stay passive if he learned Rosa had deliberately harmed her, and her smile fades as concern for the boy she left behind returns. Beneath the peaceful sky, she quietly asks what Alfred could be doing now. Far away, Alfred remembers that Rachel has always meant everything to him because they were raised together from birth, almost as closely as family. His childhood adoration eventually deepened, transforming familial affection into unmistakable romantic love. But the day Rachel saved his mother changed that tenderness into something darker. Watching her risk herself without hesitation taught Alfred how completely he could lose her, and his love hardened from ordinary devotion into a desperate, consuming attachment. When Rachel later collapsed before him, that hidden obsession took permanent root because the terror of her death felt powerful enough to crush his heart. From that moment, Alfred knew with certainty that he could never live without her. So he quietly surrounded Rachel with protection while hiding the possessiveness beneath his gentle behavior. Now a distant flash and familiar cry tear him from the settlement's cheerful streets, and Alfred sprints toward the sound, certain the earlier scream belonged to Rachel. He recognizes the magical light as well, making his growing dread impossible to dismiss, until Rachel's abandoned flowered hat confirms that something terrible has happened to her. Alfred's wide eyes harden with panic and fury when Rosa approaches the evidence, while the princess freezes beneath his stare as he addresses her with frightening coldness. Barely restraining himself, Alfred clenches his teeth before demanding an answer, but Rosa smiles sweetly and pretends he merely came to meet her for their date. Ignoring the performance, Alfred asks one brutal question: where did she send Rachel? Rosa feigns confusion, suggesting Rachel simply wandered away despite Alfred witnessing the magical flash, then innocently proposes that exhaustion made him imagine what he saw. She reaches toward him, coyly insisting the weary hero should rest, and argues that her magic is weaker than Rachel's, supposedly making teleportation impossible. Rosa quickly redirects him toward continuing their interrupted date, promising to entertain him properly. But Alfred warns that her careless words have already dug her grave. The princess's practiced smile shatters as she realizes her deception failed, because Alfred never named Rachel, yet Rosa immediately knew exactly whom his question concerned. He seizes her before she can escape, stripping every trace of gentleness from the confrontation, and orders Rosa to reveal Rachel's location immediately, his threat unmistakably real. Trembling, she asks whether the hero truly intends to cut her down. But Alfred advances through the grass without loosening his grip or lowering his weapon. He coolly asks why she ever believed he would spare her for this, and Rosa finally gasps in naked terror before the man she once worshipped, realizing Alfred may wound anyone who threatens Rachel, and fearing what confession will bring. Alfred reminds her that she called the hero equal in value to royalty, leaving Rosa unable to hide behind her title while his blade touches her throat. She protests that this is wrong, insisting her beloved hero was always gentle and kind, and desperately claims the destined man was supposed to love her. Alfred asks with icy contempt which imaginary world's hero she could possibly mean, adding that he has no interest in listening to her delusional fantasy. He grants Rosa one final chance to answer: where exactly did she send Rachel? Cornered by the blade, the princess finally whispers that Rachel went to the Demon King, then squeezes her eyes shut as tears spill from sheer fear. Horrified, Alfred demands she bring Rachel back from the Demon King's domain immediately, but Rosa admits she cannot retrieve anyone unless the target stands directly before her. Alfred orders her to teleport him instead, only to learn the spell works once daily. His restraint snaps and he furiously condemns the princess as utterly useless, before turning away with the hero's sword still naked in his hand. A sudden violent impact interrupts them, drawing armored footsteps toward the confrontation, and Brandon rushes forward in alarm upon finding the princess collapse beside Alfred. The captain demands to know what the hero has done to Greinel's royal daughter, but Alfred answers that Rosa deliberately sent Rachel into the Demon King's stronghold. Brandon stares in disbelief, unable to imagine why anyone would exile her there. Until Alfred explains Rosa attempted to eliminate Rachel, the kingdom's other saintess. Brandon turns solemnly toward Rosa and asks whether Alfred's accusation is truly correct, but she defiantly admits everything, declaring any woman obstructing her romance deserves death. Appalled, the captain warns that sending a saintess to the Demon King is treasonous crime, while Rosa protests that royal blood should place her beyond such ordinary laws. Brandon explains heroes and saintesses rank beside royalty, making attempted murder an enormous offense, and the shaken princess blurts that she never knew because the game omitted it. Her strange excuse only disgusts Brandon, since ignorance cannot erase what she deliberately did. Alfred bitterly remarks that even he never imagined her foolishness could reach such depths, as Brandon binds Rosa's wrists and prepares to escort the confessed attacker into custody. Before they leave, Alfred stops the captain with one unexpected command, ordering Brandon to postpone Rosa's formal transfer until the following day. He then tells the princess she will teleport him directly to Rachel tomorrow and quietly begins explaining what will happen if she refuses. Alfred fixes her with a merciless stare and mentions her vulnerable neck, warning Rosa not to assume her head will remain safely attached without Rachel's return. 1 month later, the story returns to Rachel inside Winfried's distant fortress, where she realizes with embarrassment how thoroughly she has adapted to demon hospitality. Everyone treats her so kindly that she dreads revealing she is actually 17, and although she once worried about human conflict, no opportunity to leave ever appeared. Left waiting in comfort, Rachel wonders helplessly what she should do next. A commotion beyond her room suddenly interrupts Rachel's lonely uncertainty, and she cautiously peeks through the ornate doorway, asking whether something happened. Nico admits there is an emergency, although the castle bell never sounded, prompting Rachel to observe that the maid appears unusually anxious despite denying panic. Nico reluctantly explains that dangerous miasma has contaminated the demon's drinking water, and Rachel immediately recognizes how seriously the entire settlement could suffer. Because the water lies near a monster spawning ground, Nico says such pollution is unprecedented, but Rachel realizes her human saintess magic might counter the growing magical contamination. After thinking carefully, she begins outlining what they should attempt, then confidently tells Nico that she has a possible solution. Rachel asks to be taken directly to the polluted water source, while Nico protests that bringing a child there is far too dangerous. Even Rachel's assurance that she can protect herself leaves the worried maid hesitant, until Winfried arrives and asks whether Rachel truly possesses a workable plan. She answers brightly that her method has a genuine chance of succeeding, and the ruler studies her resolve in thoughtful silence for one tense moment. Finally, Winfried agrees and orders Nico to bring Rachel along, leaving the young saintess startled that he trusted her proposal so readily. At the sight, a foul black mass churns through the contaminated water before them, and Rachel finds its miasma crueler than anything encountered during the human campaign. Nico anxiously asks whether white magic can truly resolve corruption this severe, recalling records that describe a similar disaster when an ancient saintess appeared. Those documents say the saintess purified an entire river, giving Rachel the answer she needed. Before beginning, she warns Winfried and Nico not to be shocked by anything they witness, then extends one bare hand toward the writhing surface without hesitation. Nico cries that approaching the poisoned water so closely is dangerously reckless, because even touching its miasma could burn and corrupt Rachel's exposed skin. Instead, brilliant white magic erupts around the girl and surges throughout the water, leaving both demons speechless as the impossible purification unfolds before them. Moments later, the black contamination has vanished beneath a clear, sparkling surface. Facing them honestly, she apologizes for hiding her identity and introduces herself as Rachel Urquhart, then gathers her courage to reveal the remaining secret behind her power. Rachel explains she is merely a village girl who happens to bear the saintess title, and later walks beside Winfried through streets revitalized by the restored water. She agrees the lively town makes the recent catastrophe seem almost impossible to remember, while Winfried thanks her warmly, acknowledging that her help made recovery possible. Rachel insists helping was natural after receiving so much care inside his home, but Winfried still wants to reward her, saying gratitude alone will not satisfy him. His persistence leaves the modest saintess smiling awkwardly as she searches for an answer. Yet she repeats that beyond her title, she remains an ordinary village girl. Winfried gently asks what reward she genuinely desires for such an extraordinary achievement, but Rachel protests that she only wanted to help, never expecting payment. Since gratitude demands something, Winfried offers to buy whatever she likes in town, and Rachel eagerly chooses a simple shopping trip through the ruler's bustling territory. They enter the bright streets together, attracting curious whispers from nearby demons, while Winfried encourages Rachel to name anything she wants without restraint. He even suggests purchasing an entire shop if ordinary merchandise feels insufficient, leaving Rachel stunned by how naturally the wealthy ruler considers buying businesses as gifts. She quickly refuses such extravagance, deciding to search for something more personally meaningful. until the aroma from a cheerful food cart catches her attention. Rachel excitedly asks Winfried to buy the fluffy cotton candy displayed there, clarifying that she wants one serving to eat, not ownership of the entire stand. Its sweetness makes her smile and wish she could share the treat with Alfred, remembering how they always divided every delicious discovery while growing up together. Rachel wonders whether cotton candy travels well, unsure when she will see him again, when hurried footsteps suddenly close the distance across the cobblestones behind her. A breathless voice cries that he finally found her, stopping Rachel mid-step, and she turns with widening eyes, recognizing the impossible voice at once. Alfred stands before her, flushed and panting as he calls Rachel's name, while she demands to know how he reached demon territory and whether he is real. Rachel remembers being teleported 1 month earlier, far beyond Rose's supposed beginner-level capabilities, and Alfred admits he punished, then corrects himself, persuaded the princess to send him here. He reaches tenderly for Rachel's cheek, silencing her questions with worried affection, until his intense inspection makes her nervously ask whether something is wrong. Alfred releases a long breath after confirming the girl before him is genuine, then smiles with profound relief, saying she appears unharmed by her ordeal. Touched by his fear, Rachel apologizes softly for causing him so much worry, while Alfred confesses he would have killed Rosa if Rachel had suffered anything. Before Rachel can process that threat, Winfried coolly addresses the unfamiliar young man and demands to know precisely who has approached his protected guest. Alfred answers with equal hostility, challenging the imposing demon to identify himself first. Rachel throws herself between their rising tempers, shouting for both men to stop, then introduces Winfried as the ruler who cared for her during her month away. She likewise presents Alfred as her precious childhood friend from Lent Village, and Winfried extends a formal gloved hand while stating his name plainly. Alfred accepts the greeting with his bare hand and introduces himself in return, though their crushing handshake immediately reveals fierce suspicion beneath the polite words. Alfred thanks Winfried for sheltering Rachel, then firmly announces he is taking her home, but the ruler notes her interest in demon society and suggests she remain longer. He also questions why humans would interrupt an important campaign by teleporting a child here. Alfred admits partial blame for the teleportation disaster, but says one truth must be clarified, making Rachel wonder nervously what dangerous subject he intends to raise. His deceptively pleasant smile only strengthens her certainty that trouble is approaching, before Alfred bluntly announces that Rachel is 17, regardless of her youthful appearance. The revelation follows them into Winfried's imposing throne room for a private explanation, where Rachel confirms her age and apologizes for allowing the misunderstanding to protect herself. Winfried responds with unexpected amusement instead of the anger she feared, and calmly escorts the reunited pair back across the grand hall. He pats Rachel's head, sympathizing with the effort required to maintain her childish disguise, then says he cannot blame her when his own assumptions created the misunderstanding. Rachel begins thanking him, moved once again by Winfried's generous understanding, but Alfred sharply knocks the ruler's gloved hand away from her hair. He demands that Winfried stop touching Rachel casually while the demon refuses obedience. Their rivalry ignites when both men declare that Rachel is deeply important to them, and Alfred boasts that childhood closeness let them share bedding and walk arm in arm. He even mentions bathing together, provoking a shocked reaction from Winfried and Rachel alike, until Rachel silences Alfred's suggestive bragging with one furious strike. Winfried stares at her uncertainly, and Alfred hastily insists everything was misunderstood. While Rachel explains the bath occurred only because demons mistook her for a child, Alfred counters that their 17 shared years still make his bond with Rachel stronger. Winfried dismisses Alfred's insecure boasting and advises him against forcing the comparison, but Alfred suddenly remembers this romantic rival is also the campaign's demon king. His hand closes around the hero's sword as hostility replaces playful jealousy, and Alfred lunges, promising to cut Winfried down with one decisive strike. The demon ruler effortlessly evades him, remarking that the hero's movements are slow, which only makes Alfred grit his teeth and attack with greater determination. Their weapons and robes blur across the hall while Rachel struggles to intervene, because Winfried is the game's final opponent and cannot be defeated casually. More importantly, Rachel stops Alfred by revealing that killing the demon king solves nothing, then explains the hidden truth connecting monsters, demons, and their actual source. Alfred realizes their real destination must therefore be the place where monsters originate, and reluctantly lowers his blade while Rachel clings to his cloak. He cheerfully offers to destroy the source first and murder Winfried afterward, horrifying Rachel, but Winfried warns the spawning ground is shrouded in miasma that instantly dissolves humans. Alfred demands an alternative, refusing to watch monsters continue multiplying forever, and Winfried answers that a saintess can shield travelers from the deadly corruption. That requirement leaves Rachel slowly recognizing what the final plan demands, until Winfried states plainly that they need her power to reach the source. He instructs Rachel to maintain defensive magic continuously as they advance through the miasma, allowing Alfred to reach the center, pierce it, and sever monster creation at its root. Alfred accepts the plan and cheerfully proposes departing immediately, startling Rachel with his urgency, because severing the source now is safer than allowing more monsters to gather near town. Rachel worries their current strength cannot survive a destination resembling the game's final dungeon, but Winfried places a reassuring hand on her shoulder and says they will manage. He announces that he will accompany them personally rather than expose Rachel to danger alone, while Alfred insists his own protection would keep her safe without any rival's assistance. Their familiar jealousy flares behind her, leaving Rachel increasingly doubtful about this expedition. Nevertheless, the three soon follow a narrow forest trail toward the monster source, where Rachel asks whether a larger extermination force would improve their chances. Winfried explains shielding many soldiers would exhaust her magic before they reach their destination, and Rachel accepts that losing her barrier early would doom everyone instantly. Another concern remains: Alfred should still be far below the level required here. When a huge reptilian monster lunges from the surrounding forest without warning, Alfred destroys it in one swift attack, leaving Rachel shocked by his sudden strength. She asks whether he secretly hid this power, but Alfred genuinely denies it, explaining Rosa misplaced him in the forest, where desperate battles naturally made him stronger. Since monsters near the final area are extremely powerful, his survival produced spectacular growth, while Winfried credits Rachel's earlier barrier with protecting town during the dangerous mistake. The ruler calls the pursuers villains chasing a child, though he praises Alfred's fortunate improvement. And Alfred loudly insists he knew Rachel was 17 while she blocks out their bickering. After more travel, their footsteps finally reach the barren ground surrounding the hidden destination, and Alfred recognizes the ominous place ahead as the monster source. A vast corrupted hollow yawns beneath twisted roots, crawling with concentrated darkness, while Rachel's barrier immediately hisses against the miasma pressing around them. She pours enormous power into the shield, knowing anything weaker will collapse, and tears gather in Rachel's eyes as the relentless strain begins hurting her. She urges Alfred to hurry before her magic fails, and he promises to finish quickly. The hero charges through the protected opening with his sacred sword ready, carving into the black growths that twist outward to block his path. Winfried sweeps aside another attack, clearing room for Alfred to advance. And Rachel marvels that both men remain astonishingly powerful beneath her shield. Their combined assault tears open the source's thick, writhing outer corruption, leaving Alfred poised before its exposed center with the hero's sword raised. He tightens both hands around the hilt, certain this final strike will suffice, then drives the blade downward and declares the nightmare finished. The battlefield falls eerily still, with the hero's sword planted before Alfred. And Rachel cheers in relieved delight, believing their impossible mission has succeeded. Without warning, a surviving black tendril erupts from the broken ground beside Alfred, as more corrupted spikes whip across the battlefield toward the unprepared party, and a horrified voice screams Rachel's name when the darkness turns upon her. Rachel realizes her weakened barrier cannot possibly stop the source's final direct attack, and briefly wonders whether her hard-won second life will end here. Winfried fights toward her, equally horrified that she might die after surviving so much, but Rachel decides she carries no regrets worth surrendering to now. Refusing to conserve anything, she gathers every remaining trace of white magic between her hands, even as pain and tears blur the friends desperately trying to reach her. Rachel unleashes everything with one defiant cry that she will not die there, and her radiant force strips the last black corruption from the devastated battlefield. When silence returns, Rachel breathes in wonder that she is somehow still alive, then tries to stand as her exhausted body begins shaking uncontrollably. Dark miasma stains her trembling palm, revealing that the attack reached her after all, and Rachel coughs blackened blood while staring at the horrifying residue in confusion. She wonders weakly whether spending too much magic caused this sudden collapse, before Alfred catches her and frantically calls her name with Winfried beside them. Through tears, he begs Rachel to remain conscious because he still has countless things to say, but her face grows unbearably heavy as darkness swallows Alfred's desperate voice. Rachel eventually opens her eyes again, bewildered by the unexpected light around her, remembering that she collapsed beside the defeated monster source only moments earlier. Soft bedding beneath her hand feels so heavenly that death seems almost plausible. Until Alfred's familiar voice calls the afterlife theory ridiculous from beside her bed. Rachel bolts upright and finds Winfried standing nearby inside the luxurious bedroom, then demands to know why she was brought back to his fortress. He explains that he carried her there after the collapse and watched her sleep 1 week, astonishing Rachel, who cannot understand surviving so long without food or water. Winfried says a saintess facing mortal danger instinctively uses her power to heal herself, making Rachel call the ability convenient until his stern look checks her levity. She remembers even ordinary illnesses healing within a day, perhaps through that same hidden blessing. Yet Winfried calls her far too carefree despite Rachel's cheerful insistence that she survived. He firmly concludes that the crisis was genuinely dangerous and cannot be dismissed, forcing Rachel to ask whether she truly came close to dying. The confirmation leaves her sitting very still, finally understanding how serious everything became, and Rachel lowers her gaze as guilt replaces her earlier relief. When she apologizes, Winfried strokes her head and says the failure to protect her was his. Rachel protests that nobody could have predicted such an extraordinary final attack, then smiles brightly and asks him to stop worrying because she feels healthy now. Winfried still tries to object, unable to release the fear so easily, but Rachel gently cuts through his hesitation with another request. She asks him to resume their interrupted Castletown walk once she has recovered, and the invitation catches Winfried completely off guard for a silent moment. His expression softens into a warm smile as he agrees to accompany her again. Rachel returns the promise with a peaceful smile, finally enjoying the safety around her. when Alfred suddenly lunges across the bedside and wraps her in a desperate embrace. He says he is grateful she awakened, unable to imagine what he would have done otherwise, while privately admitting he had been ready to follow Rachel into death. Alfred blames himself for not moving fast enough when the last attack struck, but Rachel demonstrates her working arms and insists she is perfectly fine now. Her childish proof fails to reassure him, and Alfred says her name with painful seriousness, asking Rachel quietly not to push herself merely to ease everyone else's fear. She finally accepts his concern with a soft, honest acknowledgement, then squeezes his hand and thanks Alfred for remaining beside her. Winfried watches their intimate exchange in increasingly uncomfortable silence, before remarking that the childhood friends keep an unusually small distance between them. Rachel genuinely wonders whether they seem close since their behavior feels completely normal. While Alfred rests another possessive hand upon her shoulder, he calls their lifelong familiarity sibling-like, and Winfried pointedly repeats the description, though their glaring faces show the romantic rivalry remains very much alive. Changing subjects, Alfred mentions a royal ceremony planned after their return and asks Rachel's intentions, explaining it will celebrate the hero's completed monster eradication campaign. And he requested increased compensation because Rachel contributed more than anyone else. Rachel appreciates Alfred's advocacy, although she remains unsure what reward she actually wants. Privately, her only heartfelt ambition is surviving peacefully and living an ordinary, very long life, since appearing at the ceremony would publicly reveal her face as the nation's true saintess. Rachel would rather avoid such fame, yet knows refusal has become nearly impossible, because destroying the monster source leaves her no remaining excuse to disappear. She asks where Greinel's king is, hearing he wanted to visit once she awakened, then protests that traveling between the human and demon capitals should require half a year. Winfried reveals his fortress connects directly to Greinel's castle through an ancient magical gate, a demon teleportation art linking fixed doorways without crossing the enormous distance between them. Rachel cautiously asks whether demons truly accept renewing contact with the humans who persecuted them, and Winfried says the current king learned the history, apologized formally, and proposed restored relations. Emotional reconciliation will take time, but he intends to guide both peoples toward cooperation, leaving Rachel quietly pleased that peace may finally become possible. She agrees with his patient approach while Alfred listens beside the recovery bed. And several hours later, Winfried leads them through the fortress to the hidden passage. The imposing door looks strangely ordinary despite its extraordinary purpose, because Winfried explains a functional corridor has no reason for decorative grandeur. Rachel nervously asks whether the dark doorway could secretly connect to the gates of hell, but Winfried reassures her it joins real locations and promises to accompany them. Alfred squeezes close as well, declaring that Rachel will have him beside her, and the nervous saintess finally steps across the ancient threshold into darkness. Complete blackness surrounds Rachel immediately, making every cautious step feel uncertain, although the presence of Alfred and Winfried beside her keeps fear manageable. Their shoes echo through the unseen passage as all three continue forward, until a brilliant white opening finally appears ahead of Rachel. They emerge directly into Greinel's throne room, startling the waiting royal court, where the delighted, heavily bearded king greets their arrival with booming enthusiasm. Rachel cannot believe the magical doorway opens beside the throne rather than somewhere discreet, before the king welcomes his saintess home and praises her difficult service. His kindness makes Rachel wonder what punishment ultimately befell the princess who endangered her. But the king notices Winfried and respectfully confirms that he is the demon king. Winfried answers that he rules the demons, then clarifies this man cannot represent all humanity, and Greinel's king explains that humans possess many countries while he governs only one. Accepting the cultural difference, Winfried proposes that both peoples learn from each other gradually, which encourages the king to address the painful history between them. He removes his jeweled crown and lowers himself before the demon ruler, apologizing on humanity's behalf for the persecution committed against Winfried's people long ago. Rachel watches the unprecedented royal apology in quiet astonishment, while Winfried says nobody alive among the demons remembers those ancient offenders personally. He declares the past finished and chooses to judge humanity by the present, greatly relieving the king, who requests lasting friendship and cooperation from that day onward. Winfried accepts the offered hand, formally sealing the beginning of their new relationship, before the king invites him to attend the ceremony beside the hero and saintess. Publicly honoring the demon ruler would help citizens understand and support peaceful cultural exchange, so Winfried accepts, and the king promises to host him as an honored guest. Rachel is then escorted away and presented with an astonishingly elaborate ceremonial dress, because the attendants insist Greinel's saintess must appear suitably magnificent before the kingdom. Royal maids surround her inside the fitting room, measuring and adjusting every detail, while Rachel thanks them stiffly when they praise how beautifully the dress suits her. They next unveil an overwhelming selection of jewels to complement the formal clothing, and cheerfully warn that preparations have only begun, filling Rachel with dread. Every simple choice is rejected as too plain, prolonging the noisy fitting for hours until night finally settles over the tall towers of Greinel's castle. Rachel collapses onto her bed in exhaustion, relieved that the ordeal is over, after even her bath became another elaborate swarm of attendants and instructions. She wonders how Rosa endured such overwhelming royal care every single day. which reminds Rachel that she has not seen the princess since returning. The troubling absence makes her wonder what ultimately happened to Rosa, despite everything the princess did by teleporting Rachel into enemy territory. Rachel decides to ask the king for the truth when morning arrives, then closes her tired eyes while unease about Rosa quietly remains. A faint noise pulls Rachel from sleep, leaving her confused in the darkened room as a silent shadow moves closer across the bedside floor. Rachel looks up and finds a disheveled Rosa standing over her with hollow eyes, making the saintess gasp before she can conceal her shock. Rachel identifies the princess aloud, scarcely believing she entered the guarded room, while Rosa offers an eerie greeting and asks why Rachel is here. She says she came personally after hearing Rachel would appear at the ceremony, and turns toward the window with deceptive calm as Rachel confirms the rumor. Beneath that calm, Rosa brands Rachel a thief who stole her rightful place, insisting she alone should attend the ceremony instead of the unwanted losing heroine. Her resentment condenses into one repeated promise that Rachel will never be forgiven, as Rosa suddenly produces a concealed knife beside the bed. She lunges, and Rachel barely twists away while the blade tears through the bedding, sending fabric and ornaments scattering through the room during their struggle. Rosa rages that she was the heroine, yet somehow Rachel became the obstacle instead, claiming she merely tried restoring the proper route that Rachel should never have joined. Following the game, she teleported Rachel away expecting monsters near the Demon King to kill her, while Rachel realizes the exit lies behind Rosa and white magic cannot safely incapacitate humans. The princess demands to know how Rachel could possibly remain alive after that exile, and bitterly adds that she even befriended Winfried before eliminating every monster. Rosa screams that none of these changes ever existed in the game she knew, accusing Rachel of stealing her rank, honor, and rightful place as the heroine. The princess declares that killing Rachel will let her reclaim everything, then raises the knife with a terrifying smile and promises to murder her. Rachel watches the descending weapon reflected in her wide, helpless eye, while Rosa orders her to return the life she believes was stolen. Every frustrated grievance erupts as the princess charges, claiming Rachel took absolutely everything, and the unarmed saintess shields her face, convinced this second chance may finally end. A sharp metallic sound interrupts the attack before the blade can reach her, and dark enchanted chains suddenly coil around Rosa's arms and torso. She thrashes against the restraints, demanding an explanation but cannot move another step. Winfried stands inside the doorway with Alfred behind him, answering Rachel's relieved call, and Alfred rushes immediately toward her while the captured princess remains immobilized. Rachel's knees finally give way and she apologizes that terror drained her strength. Alfred steadies her gently, telling Rachel not to worry and regretting their delayed rescue, while she confesses that helplessness against a human frightened her more than facing monsters. Because her white magic cannot attack people, Rachel had never understood how vulnerable she remained, and Alfred says her name softly, recognizing the trauma beneath her trembling voice. He embraces Rachel and strokes her back, promising that she is safe now. Meanwhile, Rosa orders Winfried to release her, insisting a princess should escape consequences. Alfred's expression hardens as he listens to her invoke royal privilege again, and Rosa defiantly asks whether he still dares challenge her identity as princess. Alfred answers that anyone attempting Rachel's murder is simply a criminal, rejecting Rosa's accusation that Rachel stole the honor and position she deserved. He says every act that dragged her into misery came from Rosa's own choices, while Winfried adds that attempted murder remains criminal even when royalty commits it. Rosa protests she only teleported Rachel and therefore bears no blame since Rachel survived. But Winfried dismisses that defense as nothing more than pathetic sophistry. He concludes that reasoning with such foolishness is completely pointless, stunning Rosa, who cannot believe the Demon King dared call her a fool. She turns pleadingly toward Alfred, certain the gentle hero must defend her, and insists he should love her because she is the heroine destined for him. Alfred replies that she loves only an imaginary character she forced onto his face. But Rosa screams denial, refusing to release the fantasy sustaining her identity. She blames Rachel for changing Alfred and claims eliminating Rachel will restore everything, until both men agree that continuing this conversation cannot accomplish anything. Brandon and armed guards burst inside, urgently checking whether the saintess survived unharmed, and Rachel explains a maid heard Rosa's threats, then escaped to summon help. Surprised by the response, Rachel asks whether Rosa had already been confined in prison, and Brandon confirms her magic was disabled before she entered a secure royal cell. Rachel understands Rosa's fury grew from losing her former life, comfort, and royal freedom, but asks the captain not to punish the maid whose trust Rosa exploited. She then notices Brandon addressing her much more formally than before, and asks why his relaxed manner disappeared during their separation. Brandon explains her official recognition as Saintess requires proper respect, though he agrees to converse normally, making Rachel privately appreciate how considerate and dependable the captain remains. Rosa mockingly notes that even Brandon recognizes Rachel as the kingdom's true Saintess, raging that the despised losing heroine has become someone unrecognizable from the game. Rachel realizes the original Rosa was a different person entirely, despite sharing this princess's body. then asks whether her attacker genuinely played the game she claims to adore. Rosa laughs at the question, calling it ridiculous and insulting because she repeatedly completed her beloved story yet somehow lost both heroine and saintess roles. Rachel answers the self-pity with one weary, disappointed sigh, then asks why someone knowing every route still failed to become the heroine. The question shocks Rosa into silence, exposing a possibility she never considered. As Rachel compares her cruelty with the game's famously pure and gentle princess, she asks whether Rosa was ever truly kind enough to deserve that heroine's place, and the captive woman can find no immediate answer to the accusation. Rachel explains that this world contains living people with individual minds, not disposable characters, and condemns Rosa for treating everyone around her like toys in a private game. Rosa whispers that nobody ever loved her, despite believing she was finally the heroine, revealing childhood abandonment by parents in her former life and desperate emotional isolation. Reincarnation seemed to promise a world where the hero would finally love her completely, yet that imagined devotion never arrived, leaving Rosa feeling rejected again. Rachel reminds her that Greinel's king genuinely loved and cherished his daughter. Recalling the proud tenderness he showed whenever speaking about Rosa, she had dismissed that father as merely another game character and never saw his heart, despite constantly insisting that receiving love was everything she desired. Rachel asks whether Rosa's loneliness truly came from others, or from rejecting their affection, and the broken princess finally admits that her own choices were wrong. Listening nearby, the king steps forward with a sorrowful expression. Confessing he spoiled Rosa excessively because she was precious, mistaking indulgence for loving guidance. He now understands that protecting her too much helped create this tragedy, and Rosa tearfully calls him father, recognizing his love only after losing it. The king answers that she committed another grave crime and must face punishment, stripping Rosa of royal status and sentencing her to the Western Tower's lowest level. He adds that they will likely never meet again after her transfer, prompting Rosa to struggle against the guards and beg her father to reconsider. Her anguished cry asks why his love appeared clearly only when everything ended, while Rachel watches the painful separation in solemn, reflective silence. After Rosa is removed, Rachel clenches her hands beneath the lingering weight of everything, but Alfred quietly assures her that none of Rosa's crimes were Rachel's fault. She accepts his reassurance, though sadness remains in her softened expression. Before the king bows and apologizes for the danger his daughter caused the saintess, he remembers Rosa as a genuinely good child before something inside her changed, and Rachel suspects recovering memories from her previous life created that transformation. Without those memories, Rosa might have lived peacefully as an ordinary princess and heroine, but now Rachel can only hope confinement brings reflection and eventual peace. The king apologizes to Winfried for disrupting his ceremonial visit, but receives graceful understanding. Winfried then adds that he has one important proposal for their alliance, immediately drawing Rachel's wary attention and the king's curious surprise. The king asks him to explain what arrangement he has in mind, and Winfried frames it as a practical way to deepen exchange between both nations. He proposes recognizing his marriage to Rachel as proof of lasting human-demon friendship. Leaving the startled saintess blushing over the idea of marrying Winfried, Brandon observes that such a union could reduce prejudice and benefit both kingdoms enormously, and the delighted king begins approving the politically elegant solution until Alfred steps between them and loudly stops the discussion. He declares that Rachel will marry him instead, stunning everyone in the room because Alfred insists they already made a marriage promise when they were 5. Rachel protests that promises made at 5 cannot possibly remain binding now, but Alfred takes her hand and asks whether she never meant their vow sincerely. Her hesitation leaves him theatrically devastated before the entire royal audience, and he tearfully accuses Rachel of playing with his innocent, devoted heart. She panics that failing to deny this quickly may carry her straight into marriage, while Winfried watches the childhood friends with a knowing little smile. He remarks that Alfred's claim is unfortunate because Rachel seems better suited to him, then argues a saintess marrying the demon king offers the fastest path toward friendship. Alfred condemns political marriage, although Rachel also protests that any wedding feels far too sudden. Winfried clarifies his interest is not merely diplomatic. He genuinely likes Rachel herself and leans close to ask whether marrying him would truly make her unhappy. Overwhelmed by his beautiful face, Rachel begs him to stop using such devastating charm, then admits awkwardly that she does not exactly dislike the idea. Her uncertain answer immediately throws Alfred back into jealous agitation, and he loudly appeals to the king, declaring he will marry Rachel instead. Alfred argues a hero-saintess union would receive the people's overwhelming support, clasping Rachel's hand tightly as he presses his own public claim. Yet he promises the real reason is simple. He has always loved Rachel deeply. Winfried covers their joined hands with his glove, refusing to surrender so easily, and says he knows Rachel's virtues despite their brief time together, while Nico awaits her return. Both men lean closer and demand Rachel choose between them immediately, but she postpones the answer, pleading that her parents and Rim still await her return. Outside, peaceful daylight settles over Greinel's towers after the chaotic night, while Rachel sighs alone inside the luxurious room assigned to her. She wonders when anyone will finally allow her to return home, since the journey supposedly ended, yet she somehow remains living inside the royal castle. Alfred occupies the neighboring room, which resembles his intended game ending with Rosa, but he assumes both will remain permanently because Rachel is now the official saintess. Rachel rejects lifelong palace residence, insisting her mother expects nothing and she remains a villager, because sainthood was an accidental burden never meant to replace the ordinary life she wants. Alfred happily interprets this as Rachel finally deciding to return home, then announces he will naturally accompany her back to Lent Village. Blushing furiously, he proposes reporting their marriage together once they arrive, and Rachel grabs him before his fantasy can race any farther ahead. Alfred promises to negotiate calmly, even accepting that Rachel's father may punch him, then imagines a new house where they can enjoy married life alone. Overwhelmed by his complete imaginary future, Rachel insists she only wants her normal family home when Winfried enters, and she greets him as someone who might finally speak reasonably. The demon ruler smiles pleasantly, briefly encouraging her misplaced confidence. Before declaring Rachel should live in his fortress, making her collapse in disbelief, Alfred insists Rachel belongs with him in Lent Village, while Winfried praises fortress comforts and both men competitively list her favorite things to prove who understands her better. As their argument grows louder, Rachel quietly carries her tea toward the window, gazing outside with a serene smile untouched by either extravagant plan. She concludes that her familiar family home remains the place she truly wants.